Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Today, we're heading deep into Texas Backroads where the highways are empty. The air feels wrong and the shadows have stories to tell. These aren't legends. They're 20 true disturbing encounters from vanishing gas stations and silent ghost towns to creatures that walk like men but aren't. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most people leave without subscribing, and that's a mistake. They miss the creepiest stories we drop here. Don't be one of them. Hit subscribe now, because today's just the beginning, and what's waiting out there doesn't always stay. On the road, let's dive into 20 true disturbing encounters on Texas Backroads. In the summer of 1998, the air over Route 277 shimmered like heat off a skillet. Donnie Ruiz, a long-haul trucker out of Corpus Christi, had driven that lonely Texas highway 100 times, hauling everything from frozen meat to auto parts. That night, he was pushing through a delivery to Del Rio, hoping to make it before his eyes gave out from fatigue. He wasn't a superstitious man, never had been. He believed in things he could touch: diesel engines, burnt coffee, concrete rest. Stops. Ghost stories were for bored men and drunks, not guys like him. But that night, something broke in the world. Something shifted sideways. And Donnie never made it to Del Rio. The trouble started 20 miles outside Eagle Pass. The Kenworth started, bucking like it had water in the fuel line. Lights flickered. The CB went to static, then cut out entirely. Then the engine just quit. Nothing dramatic, no bang, no pop, just dead silence, like someone had flipped a master switch in the sky. Donnie coasted to the side of the road, cursing under his breath, trying the ignition 3, 4, 5 times. Nothing. No other vehicles had passed in hours. It was nearly 1 in the morning, and Route 277 felt less like a highway and more like a thread stretched over a black ocean. There were no lights, no signs, no markers, just the dark, and the stars above flickering like nervous eyes. Donnie gave it another 10 minutes before he stepped out, flashlight in hand, and started walking. He remembered a service station a few miles back. It had been closed the last few times he passed it, boarded up, windows caked with dust, but he figured maybe someone was there. Maybe a phone. Something. The walk felt longer than it should have. The air was thick, but not hot. It felt wrong, like the inside of a still closet. Even the bugs weren't chirping, which in South Texas is stranger than silence itself. Donnie walked with his flashlight scanning the gravel shoulder, the beam barely cutting into the blackness ahead. He kept expecting to hear a car, a coyote, something, but there was only the crunch of his boots and the sound of his own breathing, growing louder with every step. Then he saw it. The gas station dot. It looked like something out of the 50s, peeling red and white paint, rusted metal pump handles, a glass door with a crooked open sign hanging by a string. A single bulb over the entrance was on, dim and yellowed like an old man's tooth. The windows were dirty but intact. The place didn't look abandoned at all. It looked frozen. Donnie approached, grateful and uneasy all at once. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a photograph, not a place. Like if he reached out too quickly, his hand would go right through it. But it was real. The concrete was cracked, weeds growing through it. A lizard darted across his boot. The pump readouts were zeroed out, ancient and analog. Then he saw the man inside. He stood near the counter. Tall, maybe 6'5", wearing a black preacher's coat that reached to his ankles. He didn't move. Didn't even seem to breathe. Donnie froze, watching him through the glass. The light from the overhead bulb was too dim to make out the man's face clearly, but something was off. His head tilted slightly, like he was listening. Donnie rapped on the glass dot. The man moved, just a little. His head turned a few degrees, jerky, unnatural, like a puppet's head on a bad string. Donnie felt his mouth go dry. The flashlight slipped a bit in his sweaty grip. He knocked again. "Hey, you got a phone in there?" I broke down. No answer. The man stepped forward. He walked like someone who'd forgotten how. His arms hung too long. His legs bent too slow. And when he came close enough for the overhead bulb to hit his face, Donnie took a full step back. The man had no eyes. Not just sockets, no eyes. Just smooth, blank skin stretched tight across where the eyes should have been, like wax over a hollow. And even without pupils, Donnie felt the man was looking at him. Then the door creaked open. No sound from the man. Just that slow, mechanical movement and the smell that hit Donnie like rot and warm pennies. It was coming from inside. It was old blood and mildew and something worse underneath, like the breath of something that had been buried. Donnie ran. He didn't think. Didn't grab his flashlight when it hit the ground. He just turned and bolted, feet slipping in the loose gravel. He didn't look back, not once. The darkness swallowed him whole, but he didn't stop running until the gas station was far behind. His lungs burned, legs ached, sweat dripped from every pore. He fell once, skinning his palms and knees, and got back up without even realizing it. The panic was full now. Not fear panic, like drowning. Like being pulled down by something unseen. When he made it back to his truck, it was sitting just as dead as before, but the headlights were on. He hadn't left them on. And the cab light glowed faintly, like someone had just climbed out. He locked the doors, curled up in the sleeper berth, and waited for dawn. Police found him there hours later. Pale, shaking, mumbling about the man with no eyes. He took 3 tries to start making sense. They assumed heat stroke, maybe sleep deprivation. But when they drove back up Route 277 to find the station Donnie kept describing corner of Devil's Cross turn, they found nothing. Just a collapsed foundation and some blackened, scorched earth in a footprint pattern, large and sunken. The outline of old gas pumps remained in the dirt, but the metal was gone, rusted away or melted. There was no bulb. No glass door. Just silence. Donnie left trucking the next month. Moved to Ohio. Never explained why. When people asked, he'd smile a little and say, "Roads remember things, you know, even if we don't." Years later, a kid hiking through the area with his father found an old flashlight, cracked and dead, half buried in the dirt near the ruins. His father took a picture. In the background, if you looked just right, there was a tall man in a black coat standing in the trees. No one remembers seeing him there at the time. No one saw where he went, but he was watching. They'd driven out past the lights. That was the whole point. Friday nights in Lubbock didn't offer much to begin with. And for Tyler and Marissa, 2 seniors with a shared restlessness and a dented blue Saturn handed down from his cousin, open stretch of Farm Road 1294 was where they went when they didn't want to be seen. It was flat out there, almost disorienting. The way the horizon dropped into nothing, with barbed wire fences barely holding the world together. Grain silos loomed in the distance like crooked tombstones, and the wind was constant, whispering through the dry mesquite and creaking power lines, like something trying to talk but forgetting how. They weren't even really doing anything. Just talking, arguing a little. Tyler had a habit of biting the inside of his cheek when he was lying, and Marissa had started catching it more. She accused him of texting someone else. He denied it. That kind of fight. Not explosive, just the kind that left the air sour and heavy. The windows fogged a little from their breath, and the heater blew weakly, ticking as it cycled. It was chilly for late March, That thin panhandle kind of cold that didn't show up on the forecast but crept in anyhow. Then there was the tapping. Just one, at first. A soft click on the passenger window like a fingernail. Then another. Tyler paused mid-sentence. Marissa sat up straighter. They both turned. There, in the blur of condensation and dusk, was a face. A girl's, pale, smeared with wet hair, eyes wide as silver dollars. Marissa screamed, jerking back. Tyler fumbled for the door lock, hit it twice before it caught. The girl didn't move. She just stood there, barefoot, soaked, her white nightgown, clinging to her bony frame like second skin. Her lips moved soundlessly, then she knocked again, this time more insistently. Tyler cracked the window an inch. "You okay?" "I need a ride," the girl said. Her voice was thin, flat. "Please, I'm cold." She didn't sound cold. She sounded like someone who had once known what cold was but didn't anymore. Marissa hesitated, then unlocked the door with a shaking hand. "She's freezing, Tyler. Look at her." He looked. Goosebumps covered the girl's arms and legs like pinpricks, but she wasn't shivering, not even a little. Her skin was almost blue in the dashboard light, lips pale. But her posture straight. As a board, eyes forward, wasn't that of someone scared or hurt. She stepped in with stiff limbs and sat behind Marissa without saying another word. The air changed. Tyler would later try to describe it as a pressure drop, like how the world goes silent before a tornado, all the moisture getting sucked out of the atmosphere. Only this time it was the opposite. The cold came in. The heater sputtered against it but couldn't win. Tyler glanced in the mirror. Girl sat perfectly upright, hands in her lap, her long hair dripping down the front of her gown. She stared ahead. "Where you headed?" Tyler asked. No answer. "You live out here?" Marissa asked, turning a little in her seat. "Did you break down or something?" "Nothing." But then softly, "Thank you." Just those two words. Clear and sharp and wrong somehow. Like an echo that didn't belong, they drove. Tyler didn't ask where. He just pointed the car back toward the highway, figuring they'd drop her somewhere with lights and people. A gas station, maybe. The radio fizzled with static even though it had been working fine earlier. Marissa hugged herself tight. "She's wet," she whispered, barely audible. "But the seat, Tyler, the seat's not wet." He glanced back again. The girl's hair was still dripping. The floor beneath her, feet should have been puddling, but it was dry, bone dry. Like she wasn't really there. Or wasn't all there. He didn't say anything. Just drove faster. They pulled into a Texaco about 10 miles out, one of those lonely pumps surrounded by nothing but dark and distant fields. Tyler put the car in park, turned to say something, to offer the girl a jacket or ask again if she was okay, but she was already opening the door. She stepped out slowly. Bare feet hit the pavement with a slap. Her nightgown clung tighter now, the wind flapping it against her legs. She turned toward the gas station entrance, never looking back. Marissa rolled down her window. "You okay? Need help calling someone?" But the girl just walked into the building. They waited 5-10 minutes. No one came out. No one else pulled in. Finally, Tyler got out and went inside. The place was dead quiet. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A row of candy bars stood untouched. And a fly circled above the hot dog roller, which wasn't rolling. A man sat behind the counter, reading a car magazine. "Hey," Tyler said, walking up. The man looked up, squinting like he hadn't seen anyone in days. "The girl who just walked in," Tyler said. "She okay?" "We picked her up on 1294. The clerk frowned. "What girl?" "She was just here," Tyler insisted. Soaking wet, white nightgown, barefoot. The man shook his head. "Ain't seen anybody in hours." Tyler looked back at the door. Nothing. No wet prints. No sign of anyone. Back in the car, Marissa had turned completely around in her seat. What did he say? Said he hadn't seen anyone. They didn't talk on the way back. Marissa kept her arms crossed, her teeth worrying her bottom lip raw. Tyler stared ahead like he was afraid the road might vanish if he blinked. Neither of them turned around. Not even once. When they finally pulled into Marissa's driveway, she got out without saying anything. Tyler sat there a moment, gripping the wheel. Then, as he glanced at the rearview mirror one last time, something caught his eye. A trail of wet footprints on the cloth back seat, clear as day, but the fabric was dry. Not even damp. He left the car unlocked that night. Maybe he hoped if he didn't try to trap it, it wouldn't come back. But she did. Once, in the fall, he saw her standing near a drainage ditch off the same farm road. Just standing, staring. Her hair was still wet, even though it hadn't rained in a week. Another time, he swore she passed behind his headlights out near the cotton fields, barefoot and rigid, vanishing into the rows like smoke. He tried to tell himself it had been a prank. Maybe a lost girl with mental problems. Maybe some freak coincidence. But late at night, when the wind rattled his window and the heat never quite kicked in, he remembered the feel of her presence like cold trapped in his bones, and the fact that those footprints never dried. They just faded, slowly, as if she'd never been there. Marissa moved away after graduation. She never responded to his messages. Tyler stayed local, took over his dad's auto shop in Shallowater, kept his head down. But even now, years later, sometimes he'll see something on a late drive, just a flicker, a girl by the side of the road, barefoot and dripping, her goose flesh rising like thorns. And once, when a new couple came in, both pale and wide-eyed, telling him about a girl on the highway who disappeared outside the Alsups by the wind farm, he didn't say a word, just nodded, took their keys, and stared at the back seat, at the faint, fading outlines of feet. It was the kind of thing that started as a whisper in gas stations and barbershops, the kind of story you only heard if you lived around Calhoun County long enough, especially near Port Lavaca where the land gets flat and wind-whipped and the Vivo Moya. Sky always feels too big. FM 1090 stretches quiet and lonely between nothing and more nothing, a rural highway ribboned with dead armadillos and sun-bleached billboards for fireworks stands that haven't operated in 20 years. A straight shot of cracked asphalt, flanked by parched mesquite and cow pastures behind sagging wire fences. Not a place you'd think twice about unless you've heard about the no-sound zone. That's what folks call it now. The no-sound zone. There's no marker, no official explanation, no real consensus on where exactly it starts or ends. But everyone agrees it happens somewhere between the old LaSalle grain elevator and the rusted-out sign for Crossroads Baptist Church, about a 2-mile stretch that's as forgettable as any other part of rural Texas. Only it's not anymore. First time I heard about it, I was nursing a beer at Rudy's Feed and Grill, half watching a high school football replay on the dusty screen above the bar. An old trucker named Dean, thick-necked and leathery from years on the road, was talking low to a younger guy, someone new to the area by the sound of it. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but Dean wasn't exactly subtle. "I seen him," he said, voice like gravel. "Right there in the ditch, 7 of them, all standing side by side, mouths open like they was screaming. Only thing is, there wasn't a goddamn sound, nothing, not even my own engine." The younger guy laughed uncomfortably, said something about sleep deprivation, maybe a touch of heat stroke. But Dean just stared at him, dead serious, his hand clenching the neck of his Lone Star. He wasn't joking. That was last September. By October, 2 more stories surfaced. A school teacher from Victoria got stranded when her car died in that stretch. She said it was like driving into a vacuum. The music on her radio warped, turned into a fizz of static, then cut off completely, followed by the engine. She coasted for a few seconds, confused, until she realized she couldn't hear anything. Not the tires on the road, not her breath, not even her own heartbeat. The silence was so complete it made her panic, made her scream, and she couldn't hear that either. Said her throat hurt from it. She got out of the car and started running, thinking maybe she was going deaf or dreaming, but the silence followed her. A full minute passed before the world came roaring back. Wind, insects, traffic far off somewhere. Her car started right back up like nothing had happened. She never took FM 1090 again. Started going 20 minutes out of her way just to avoid it. Then came the trucker, bleeding from both ears. Drove straight off the road just past the no-sound stretch, left his rig tilted in a drainage ditch. When they pulled him out, he was sobbing. Not from pain, but from something else. He said he heard it all at once, everything. Every sound that should have happened in the last 2 minutes compressed into a single, shrieking burst. He said it felt like it crawled inside his skull. Doctors couldn't find anything wrong with him physically. He stopped driving freight altogether. Moved to his brother's place in Temple. People said he started sleeping with the lights on. I didn't believe any of it, not really until January. Cold and gray, wind pushing stiff off the Gulf. I was headed back from Corpus after visiting my sister. The sun was going down fast and the sky was that cottony kind of overcast where the light just bleeds out. I took FM 1090 because I always did. Knew it better than I knew some of my friends. Never had an issue. About halfway through that stretch, just past where the church sign used to be, now leaning and splintered, I felt a flicker in the radio. Not static. Just nothing. Like the speakers had been unplugged. I glanced down, saw the station still displayed. Volume knob lit, but no sound. I tapped it. Nothing. Then I noticed the wind had stopped. No rattle in the windows, no gust pushing the truck. I turned off the radio, rolled down my window. Nothing. Not even the crunch of tires on gravel where the shoulder started. No birds. No bugs. No distant bark of a dog or hum of some far-off combine. I opened my mouth and said, "What the hell?" But it came out silent. That's when the panic hit. Not like a jolt, but like a slow, thick dread crawling up from the gut. I slammed the brake, pulled off the road. My heartbeat was pounding, but even that made no sound. I stepped out of the truck, boots crunching silently on the dry dirt. The world looked normal, still, but wrong in some bone-deep way I can't explain. Then I saw them dot in the ditch, across the road. 7 figures, just like Dean had said. Standing shoulder to shoulder. No details at first, just silhouettes against the dying light. They didn't move, didn't blink. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw their mouths were open wide like they were. Screaming, all of them. Mouths stretched into impossible O's, eyes black and endless. I wanted to run. I tried to run. But my legs felt heavy, like moving through molasses. I was maybe 20 feet from them now. I could see skin. Pale, waxy, like candle wax people carve too thin. And they were vibrating. Not visibly, but in that way you feel like something building under your skin. Like a storm underground. One of them raised a hand, and then sound hit me like a sledgehammer. Everything. My boots scraping the road, the wind snapping back into my ears, the groan of the truck's engine, my own ragged breathing, all of it returned in a single deafening burst. I staggered back, clutching my ears, gasping. The figures were gone. I drove the rest of the way home like a man possessed, hands shaking, every nerve lit up. I didn't tell anyone at first. Thought maybe I'd hallucinated the whole thing, maybe I'd fallen asleep at the wheel, maybe it was something I ate. But then a woman from Seadrift posted about it in a local Facebook group. Same spot, same silence. She didn't see the people in the ditch, but she said she saw headlights ahead of her suddenly turn around and vanish like they were swallowed by fog that wasn't there. One guy claimed to have set up a trail cam off the fence line. He posted a video. 2 minutes of normal nighttime sounds, crickets, wind, distant howls. Then nothing, silence, just video of unmoving brush. At 1 minute and 52 seconds, the footage glitches. Frame jump. For a single frame, just one, you can see a face pressed right against the lens. Mouth open, stretched far too wide, eyes like empty wells. Then gone. The guy deleted his post the next day. Account 2. I started researching. Dug through old police reports, news clippings, anything. There wasn't much. But I found something. From 1979, a sheriff's deputy named Clay Mendez crashed on FM 1090 late one night. No alcohol, no drugs. He said a wave of silence hit him, followed by visual anomalies that made him black out. The report classified it as sleep deprivation and closed the case. Clay Mendez died 2 years later, suicide. He left a note, only one sentence long. They're not screaming to scare us. They're screaming because they're trapped. I haven't been back down that road since. Neither have a lot of folks. Calhoun County's trying to play it down, hoping it'll fade. But I don't think it will. Not now. Not after what I felt, because I think whatever's causing it, it's growing. Feeding maybe? Expanding. And the silence? It's not just absence. It's something else. It's them. They say the land remembers. Maybe not like we do, with birthdays and addresses and all that tidy filing cabinet stuff. But it remembers pain, remembers blood. Onion Creek, just southeast of Austin, cuts through a ribbon of limestone hills and live oaks that have stood since before the first Comanche set eyes on the horizon. It flows lazy most of the year, more of a trickle than a creek, gurgling past exposed tree roots and under the chipped ribs of fallen cedar trunks. In a good rain season, it swells to a thick, brown muscle, dragging debris like bones downstream. But even when it looks harmless, there's something off about that water. Folks fish in it, sure, but not often, and no one camps too close. The ground gets too soft there, too quiet. And sometimes, if you're up real late, you might think you hear things just beneath the surface, like something talking without a voice. Riley Cotter, 32 years old, an HVAC tech who spent weekends hiking and geocaching, didn't know any of that. He'd only lived in Austin for about 6 months, freshly divorced and looking to start over somewhere warmer. A buddy at work had told him about a trailhead near McKinney Falls, one of those hidden gem routes you don't find on all trails. Said it was peaceful, undiscovered, and had great views of the creek from a limestone bluff about 3 miles in. Riley took that as gospel. He parked his Jeep off a gravel access road just before noon that Sunday. It was early March, cool. In the shade but warm when the sun hit your neck. He packed a water bottle, 2 granola bars, a lightweight windbreaker, and his phone for pictures. He texted his sister in Ohio before stepping off. Found a new trail. Off the map. You'd hate it. No bathrooms. He didn't see another soul for the first hour, which he liked. The trail thinned into a game path, narrow and hard to follow, but he figured it made it more authentic. There were wildflowers, scattered bones of some animal, maybe a deer, and at one point, an old barbed wire fence half swallowed by trees. He crossed it without much thought, eyes fixed on the glint of sunlight catching the creek ahead. Then the noise stopped. No birds, no rustling. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Riley paused, one boot planted in soft dirt, the other hovering over a jagged patch of limestone. That's when he saw them. 4 figures crouched at the edge of Onion Creek, drinking straight from the water. At first, he thought it was a family of some kind, maybe homeless or squatters living off-grid. But as he crept closer, hiding behind a cedar, his mind rebelled against that thought. They were hairless, completely, pale like something left in a cave for too long. Not white, exactly, more of a sickly gray like congealed milk. Their skin hung loose in places, but tight in others, stretched over bones that jutted out in wrong angles. Their arms were too long. Their knees bent the wrong way. And their faces, God, no lips, just thin slits where a mouth should be. And their eyes were like boiled eggs, foggy and pale, darting around but never really focusing. They lapped at the creek like dogs. One of them stopped, lifted its head. Water dripped from its chin. It turned toward Riley. He didn't remember making a sound, but the thing stared directly at him. Then the others looked up too. All 4. As if they'd smelled him, his heart. Jack hammered against his ribs. He raised his phone, hands trembling, trying to zoom in, but just as his thumb brushed the screen dead. The battery, which had been at 78%, blinked black. He tried the power button. Nothing. Tried again. Dead. That was when they stood. No sound came from them. No words. No growls. Not even the crunch of gravel beneath their feet. They moved in unison, jerky but fast. Riley didn't wait. He bolted. The game trail was almost gone on the way back, vanished like it had never been there. Branches clawed at his jacket, thorns tore at his pants. He tripped twice, smacking his elbow against a rock. Behind him, the woods stayed silent, but he felt watched. Hunted. It took him over an hour to find the gravel road again. When he reached the Jeep, panting and smeared with dirt, he fumbled the door open and collapsed inside. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped his keys twice before he could start the ignition. He didn't even look back. It wasn't until he got home and peeled off his boots that he noticed the solace. The thick rubber Vibram treads were shredded like something had sliced them 100 times with a box cutter. Long, curling ribbons of rubber dangled loose. His socks were threadbare. His feet bled from tiny, uniform slits across the solace, none deep but all precise, like he'd been walking on glass. He told himself it was the terrain, the limestone, the brambles. But in his gut, he didn't believe that. He tried to show the boots to his buddy from work the next day, but the guy just laughed. Sighed. Riley probably stepped in a nest of fire ants and got paranoid. Everyone knew those trails were sketchy. Riley didn't go back, of course, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. He researched cryptids, wendigos, skinwalkers, even feral people. None of it quite fit. The creatures he'd seen were ... clean, in a way. No dirt, no leaves in their skin. They looked almost artificial, like mannequins that had melted and learned to move. He never got his phone working again. Took it to a shop. The guy there said it was completely fried, as if exposed to a high voltage current. No photos, no data. Months passed. The memory dulled, but never left. He stopped hiking, stuck to city streets. Every now and then he'd dream of those pale things, crouched by the creek, slurping water like thirsty animals. He'd wake up with wet sheets and the taste of copper in his mouth. Last October, news broke of a missing boy, Caleb Ramirez, age 9, disappeared while hiking with his uncle near the same stretch of creek. They found the uncle babbling, shirtless, feet torn to ribbons. Sighed. He went to take a leak, left the boy by the trail, came back and Caleb was gone. Swore he saw figures in the trees. The boy was never found. After that, the city put up a warning sign. Trail closed due to unsafe conditions. But people still sneak in. Always do. A month ago, Rayleigh saw a Reddit post tagged "Our Unresolved Mysteries." Someone had taken a blurry photo. Near Onion Creek, a pale figure in the background, crouched and hairless, its knees bent backward, face just a blur of white smudge and darkness. The caption read, "Saw this near the water." Phone crashed right after. Anyone know what this is? The comments were half jokes, half theories. Most were written off as hoaxes, but Riley stared at that photo for a long time. His feet throbbed. Just looking at it, and then, without thinking, he packed a bag and drove south. No phone this time. No electronics at all. Just a flashlight, a hunting knife, and those old boots now rotting in the back of his closet. Maybe it was obsession. Maybe guilt. Or maybe the land was calling him back. They say the land remembers. Riley didn't, but the pale things did. It was the kind of heat that blurred the road in front of you and made your brain feel like it was slowly boiling in its own juices. The West Texas sun had been pounding the cracked blacktop of Route 87 all day, the kind of dry, sun-choked stretch that turned even short drives into endurance tests. The radio in Paul Meyer's old Dodge Ram had long since fried its tuning knob, so he'd been driving in silence for over an hour. Just the whistle of the wind leaking through the cracked window seals and the constant low hum of tires on asphalt. With somewhere between Eden and San Angelo, not much around except the occasional cluster of mesquite trees and telephone poles that leaned just a little more every year. It was the kind of drive that made you feel like the world had already ended, and you were just coasting through the aftermath. Paul didn't mind it, though. After 20 years of pipeline inspection work and divorce papers signed clean 2 springs ago, silence was more of a comfort than a curse. He saw the man standing by mile marker 239, just past an old cattle guard rusting in the dirt. No car in sight. Just standing there with one arm out, thumb extended like a ghost from a different decade. He wore jeans that looked soaked down the thighs, dark and clinging, and a white shirt gone pink down the front like he'd spilled red Kool-Aid on it or. Worse, in his other hand, he held a rolled-up paper, and even from a distance, Paul could see that it wasn't dry. He slowed. He didn't know why. Something in the back of his head told him to keep going, that this was the kind of thing you read about in small-town newspapers, some drifter with a head full of bad drugs and worse ideas. But he stopped anyway. The truck hissed as it settled. The man didn't smile when he approached. His eyes were pale gray, rimmed with red, and his lips moved without sound until he leaned halfway into the open window. "You know the way back?" he asked. Paul squinted. "Back where, friend?" The man unrolled the paper. It was a map-an. Old one, the kind you don't see anymore unless you dig through glove compartments from the 70s. But the edges, they were bleeding. Not ink, not water damage. Blood. A slow, seeping red that pulsed like it had a heartbeat. "Before the digging," the hitchhiker said. "What?" Paul asked, the heat suddenly feeling colder. The man looked up. "Before they pulled it up." "Before." The gate opened. Paul didn't answer. He stared at the map as a droplet of red dripped from the bottom corner onto the inside of his door. It left a mark, thick and real. "Look, man," Paul said, shifting the truck into park. "You need help or something?" The hitchhiker smiled then. Not kindly. Not at all. "You stopped. That means you already know." Paul's hand moved to the gear shift. "I think I made a mistake," he said. "You did?" the man said. Paul let the truck lurch forward a few feet, expecting the hitchhiker to back away. But he was already gone, not walked away, not retreated, just gone. No footprints in the gravel, no trace in the dust. Paul's skin crawled as he looked to the passenger seat and saw the map lying there, still bleeding. Slowly, steadily. The paper was warm to the touch when he reached for it, and he threw it out the window without hesitation. It landed on the road, twitching slightly in the breeze. He drove. He didn't remember much of the next 20 minutes, just that the sun seemed a little dimmer, the shadows were longer, and the hum of the road sounded like whispers, like something just outside the range of human hearing. He drove straight to a diner near Cristobal and sat there for hours with a coffee he never drank, staring out the window, trying to piece together what had happened. When he finally made it home, his knuckles were white from gripping the wheel. The next morning he washed the truck, scrubbed the inside of the door, but the stain wouldn't come off. It was still sticky. 2 weeks later, Paul didn't show up to work, didn't answer calls, didn't even pick up his last paycheck. His truck was found parked near a dry creek bed outside Mertzen. No signs of struggle. No blood. No Paul. The engine was cold, the doors locked from the inside. But on the dashboard, scorched into the plastic, like it had been seared there with a branding iron, was the outline of the map. Every road, every town. And a large red circle just north of San Angelo where no town had ever been. Just a dead stretch of mesquite and forgotten wells. They towed the truck to the impound lot in San Angelo. That night, the security guard on duty quit after one shift. Said he saw something sitting in the driver's seat around 3 a.m., said it looked like Paul, but with empty eyes and hands soaked in blood. Said it whispered something through the glass. You know the way back. The map wasn't recovered. The imprint faded over the next week until it was almost invisible. But everyone who got close to that truck said the same thing. They smelled something sweet and coppery, like pennies, like blood dot, and they dreamed of digging, of dirt being turned, something squirming beneath it, of a black gate creaking open in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dry brush and the skeletal remains of old oil derricks. They dreamed of voices calling out from the hole, offering directions, promising to take them back before it all went wrong, back before the digging, before something was pulled up that should have stayed buried forever. No one picks up hitchhikers on Route 87 anymore, not since Paul, but sometimes, just after dark, you'll see someone walking near that cattle guard by mile marker 239, holding a rolled-up paper, thumb out, waiting. And if you're unlucky enough to see him in your rearview mirror, don't stop. Don't speak. Don't even look at him too long, because the map only bleeds for those who are already halfway back. Jeremy Tolles was the kind of man who found comfort in the steady hum of an engine, the flick of mile markers as they passed under a watchful moon, and the way the road could swallow up everything behind you. He liked solitude. Needed it, really. That was part of why he took the job in overnight delivery from Odessa to Santa Fe. 11 hours, give or take. Mostly highway, mostly desolate, and exactly the kind of work a man like Jeremy could settle into. No one breathing down his neck. No conversations to fake. Just him, the truck, and the dark ribbon of asphalt unspooling before him. It was around 9:47 p.m. when he hit Highway 285, just as the last shades of sunset had been swallowed by the West Texas horizon. A lonely stretch, that road. Flat land sprawling out on either side like a dried-out sea. Fences and telephone poles and the occasional oil pump jack, all passing in the periphery like ghosts. At first, it was normal. A few distant headlights in the rear view, maybe a taillight. Far ahead, the usual. But an hour in, he realized he hadn't passed another vehicle, not coming or going. He figured it was late. The road wasn't well traveled, and it was the middle of nowhere. But as the hours ticked by, he noticed more things slipping out of place. The GPS on the dash started glitching. At first, it just froze for a second or two, normal enough. But then it started jittering, jumping back and forth across the route, recalculating. Then a moment later, searching for signal. That shouldn't have happened out here. He had driven this stretch before, had even marked the spots where service got weak. This wasn't one of them. This was straight road, dead flat, with service towers that dotted the path like metal scarecrows. Something felt wrong, and he felt it not just in his head but in his gut, like something low and slow and bad was blooming in his stomach. By hour 4, Jeremy hadn't seen a single gas station, rest stop, exit, or even one of those busted little diner signs that crop up in dying towns. Nothing. No towns. No off-ramps. Just more road dot and that sky. Jesus, that sky dot, it had gone black. Not night black, not starry or clouded or moonlit, just black. Ink poured over the sky. No stars. No moon. No clouds. Just a matte void like the sky had been erased. His headlights only pierced about 20 feet ahead, and the high beams didn't help. It felt like light was being swallowed, absorbed. The way water might look if you dropped a flashlight into a deep well. He didn't panic, not at first. Jeremy was a practical man. Maybe the highway lights had gone out, or maybe a storm was rolling in with no lightning. He tried the radio for news, but all he got was static. Not white noise either. This was low, grumbling, wet static. Almost like the radio was gargling something just below his hearing. He turned it off. By hour 7, his fuel gauge hadn't moved. Still sitting at 3/4, even though he should have burned through more than half a tank by then. He tapped the gauge. Nothing. Tried the odometer. It read 0.0. He hadn't reset it. It was around that point that Jeremy started talking to himself just under his breath. Muttering things like, "This is fine, probably a malfunction, probably just tired." But when he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw only black, no red glow from his taillights, no reflection from the pavement, he gripped the wheel until his knuckles turned white. He kept driving. Because that's what you do, right? You don't stop in the middle of nowhere. You don't get out on a black road under a black sky with nothing but strange silence wrapping around you like a second skin. But something inside him cracked around hour 11. No sign of progress. The landscape hadn't changed. The fencing on the side of the road looked identical for hours. Same broken slats, same lean in the posts, same patches of brittle grass. And worst of all, he hadn't seen the moon once. It was July. There should have been a big fat moon rising at some point. But the sky hadn't changed. No gradient. No stars. Just void. Finally, he stopped. Threw the truck in park. The tires crunched softly against gravel. Was there gravel before? And the engine ticked down to silence. He sat for a moment, listening. No wind. No bugs. Not even the high whine of power lines. He stepped out. The air was warm but dead. No breeze. He took a few steps toward the edge of the road, hoping to maybe spot a ranch light, a passing plane, anything. But there was nothing but flatness in that crushing, blank sky. Then, he walked a few more steps into the dark and hit something. It wasn't hard. It wasn't a wall in the traditional sense. It was soft-yielding, but solid, like pressing your hand to flesh. And it pulsed, just slightly, under his fingertips. He gasped, pulled his hand back, looked around. Nothing. Not even his truck. Where it had been, where he had parked it just seconds ago, there was only road. And behind the road, more blackness. He spun in place. Nothing. Not even the faint reflection of his headlights on asphalt. No tire marks. No footprints. Just himself, standing alone under an eyeless sky. Jeremy ran. He didn't know which way he went. He just moved, faster and faster, legs pumping, lungs burning, until the panic passed and exhaustion took over. He collapsed on the side of the road, or what he thought was the side. There was no horizon, no markers, nothing to guide him. But the ground still felt like packed dirt, and the smell of hot gravel clung to the air. He walked for 2 days. No sleep, no hunger. No sun. Time became abstract. The sky never changed, never lightened. He tried to keep track by counting steps, but somewhere around the 5,000 mark, he lost count. The silence pressed against him like a heavy blanket, suffocating and complete. Once, he thought he heard whispering, but it came from the sky. And it only lasted a second. Then, on what he guessed was the second day, he stumbled onto the road again. This road looked real. Fresh asphalt. New white lines. A candy wrapper fluttered near the edge, and Jeremy grabbed at it like it was gold. He held it up. Printed on the back was a contest date. Expires December 1963. That's when he saw the newspaper in the ditch. Yellowed. Tattered. The front page read, "Kennedy visits Dallas." The date November 22, 1963. His mind buckled. The silence ended in that moment like the world exhaled. Behind him, a faint engine rumbled to life. He turned, hopeful. It was his truck. Same dented fender, same Texas plates. Lights off. Parked silently at the edge of the ditch. But it was wrong. There was something in the cab, a shape in the driver's seat. He couldn't make out details, but it was driving. Not moving the truck, just mimicking the act. Hands on the wheel, staring ahead. A mockery of motion. He took a step closer. The thing in the truck turned its head toward him, and he saw its face. It was his face, but older, gaunt, hollow-eyed and waxy, like someone had stretched dead skin over a mannequin. The lips pulled back in a wide grin, too wide. And then, impossibly, it opened the door and gestured for him to get in. Jeremy ran again. He didn't stop until the sky cracked, not with light, but with sound. A single, sharp snap, like thunder, but closer, more personal. And then light, real sunlight. He was lying in a ditch on the side of 285, just outside of Pecos. A patrol car was parked nearby, and an officer was shaking his shoulder. He looked up, dazed, lips cracked, face blistered from sun exposure. The officer asked if he was all right, said folks had seen him wandering in circles for hours, talking to himself, swiping at the air like he was brushing away cobwebs. They'd followed the footprints and found him just before he hit the highway. Jeremy couldn't explain. He tried, but nothing he said made sense, not to them, not even to himself. The truck? Gone. No record of it. The company he worked for claimed no deliveries were scheduled for that route. His name wasn't in their files. His driver's license? Expired in 1961. He spent the next 2 months in a psychiatric facility in El Paso. He talked less each day. The doctor said he suffered from dissociative fugue, that he'd lost touch with time, maybe even his identity. But Jeremy knew the truth. There was a road out there that wasn't on any map. A stretch of Highway 285 that slipped out of time. Out of place. It called to people like him. People who liked the silence, who needed to get away, who wouldn't ask too many questions. He warned them, of course. Every time a new patient arrived with that look in their eyes, that 1,000-yard stare, he'd whisper to them, "Don't stop driving. Whatever you do, don't stop." Because sometimes, when the sky goes dark enough, the road starts driving you. It was a sticky summer night in 2002 when Officer Jim Rourke clocked the Lincoln at 97 miles per hour just outside the town of Shepherd, Texas. The night shift was usually dull drunks, speeders, the occasional domestic call, but this was different. There weren't a lot of cars like that around anymore. A 70s Lincoln Continental, deep forest green with chrome that caught even the dimmest light like a knife's edge. The thing looked like it had just rolled off a movie set. Too clean. Too perfect. Jim flipped on his lights and gave chase down Route 59, radioing ahead for backup from the Cleveland station. He wasn't nervous yet, just pissed. He'd been nursing a lukewarm coffee, half listening to the Astros game when that monster of a car flew past like it had a death wish. But after a few miles of pursuit, something started gnawing at him. The driver wasn't reacting like most panicked speeders. No weaving, no braking, not even glancing in the rear view. The Lincoln just kept hauling ass, hugging the center line with eerie precision. When Jim pulled up alongside it, briefly doing nearly 100, he looked over and saw the thing that made his gut drop. There was no one behind the wheel. He blinked, thinking maybe the glare off the windshield was messing with his eyes. But no, he looked again. Empty seat, no hands, no head poking up, just that big leather bench seat and the hollow dark inside. He eased back a little, heart hammering in his throat, and radioed again, this time with real urgency. Unit 17 requesting confirmation. This vehicle it appears to be unoccupied. Repeat, no visible driver. Cleveland dispatch went quiet for a second before responding with confusion. They probably thought he was having heat stroke. Backup was still 10 minutes out, so Jim stayed on it, following the Lincoln as it tore through the warm Texas dark. The air outside was thick and sweet in a way he couldn't quite place. Almost sickly, like kettle corn left too long in. The sun. They tried spike strips just north of New Caney. Officer Morales laid them across a stretch of road near the Valero. Jim saw him in the mirror, waving, ready. The Lincoln didn't swerve or slow. It hit the spikes clean. 4 loud pops. The car should have fishtailed, blown its tires to shreds. But nothing happened. The car kept going, smooth as ever, tires intact, as if the road hadn't touched it at all. And now people were talking. Citizens had pulled over, watching from the safety of headlights and pickup beds. Some filmed on chunky early 2000s camcorders, others just gawked. One woman later described the smell in the air as burnt cotton candy. Another said it made her eyes water, like sugar cooking too long on the stove. A kid, maybe 10, said he heard music coming from the car, but it wasn't anything real, not country, not rock, just humming. Like a choir buried under static. The pursuit went on. Miles turned into a blur. The Lincoln veered off Route 59 briefly and into a smaller feeder road near Splendora, kicking up dust and gravel but never slowing down. It was like the car wasn't bound by the same physics as everything else. No matter how tight the turn, or how rough the terrain, it floated over the pavement like a shark through water. And then, somewhere near mile marker 203, it disappeared, not veered off, not crashed. It just vanished. Jim had his dashcam running the whole time. You can find the footage online now, though it's been scrubbed, reposted, dissected. Most versions cut out before the end. You'll see the Lincoln speeding ahead in the dark, taillights glowing like dying embers. Then, in a flicker of static, it's just gone. The road's empty. The lights are gone. The only thing left is a shimmer in the air, like heat waves over blacktop, and that smell-sweet, thick, wrong. In the last 10 seconds of the footage, Jim's voice starts to rise. He's breathing hard. You can hear it. The camera jolts as he stops the cruiser, steps out, flashlight bouncing across the dark. And then, that scream. People say it's not quite human. Starts like a man's scream, but bends into something else. There's a warble to it, like old cassette tape warped by sun. They say if you listen close, you can hear another voice under his something whispering in a language no one recognizes. The official report says Jim Rourke suffered a psychotic break. They found him 2 days later in the woods, barefoot, babbling about the black road and the eyes in the grill. He never went back to the force. His wife left him 6 months later, took the kids to Arizona. Jim died in 2011, overdose. Painkillers and whiskey and the car? Well, That wasn't the first time it was seen. Old-timers in Point Blank talk about a similar vehicle in the early 80s. A Lincoln, same model, same color, seen floating down a closed-off road during a thunderstorm. Sheriff at the time followed. It wound up with third-degree burns on his hands and face. Said the metal tasted like lightning. In the 60s, a young girl vanished after describing a long green car idling outside her window for 3 nights. Her room smelled like burnt syrup for a week. There's talk it's not a car at all. Some say it's a vessel, something wearing the shape of a car to hunt the highways. A predator from someplace else. It doesn't want to crash or escape it. Wants to be seen, to be followed. Drawn into your mind like a hook through a fish. Some believe once you've seen it, really seen it, it never forgets you. That's why some officers involved in the 2002 incident disappeared off the grid, retired early. Some died. 2 just stopped showing up. 1, Officer Miralles, moved to Puget, Alaska. Never told anyone why. His brother said he refused to drive at night after that. Wouldn't even sit in the passenger seat. And every few years, the footage surfaces again. Not in big ways, no mainstream outlets touch it, but in odd forums, encrypted links, strange VHS tapes left at gas stations. One ended up in a pawn shop in Lufkin. Owner swore the tape rewound itself. People who watch it say their dreams change afterward. One man from Katy said he kept waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of tires on gravel, but his driveway was paved. A woman in Livingston said she started to smell sugar burning every time she used her microwave, even though nothing was inside. Others say they started seeing headlights in their rear view that disappeared when they pulled over. Just this year, a trucker posted a grainy photo from Route 59. Claimed he saw a 70s Lincoln parked on the shoulder near midnight. No driver, headlights off. But as he passed, the radio cut out and filled with static, and then that same high, trembling hum. Said the hair on his arm stood straight up and stayed that way for the next 2 hours. He didn't stop. No one ever does, not after hearing the stories. Because they say if you stop, if you tried to open that door or look into the back seat, you don't come back out the same. You leave something behind. Or worse, you take something with you, and God help you. If the car follows you, the day had been hot, even by Texas standards, the kind of heavy, sweat-soaked July heat that makes the air feel syrupy and close. The reunion was held on a patch of dusty pasture just outside Lockhart, where the oak trees were gnarled and skeletal, and the soil turned to cracked leather if you stepped off the grass. It was one of those places you'd only find by driving, 10 miles past the last gas station and turning where the mailbox had been knocked over 10 years ago. The Slocum family held their reunions there every other summer and always on the same land, a scraggly spread owned by Aunt Doris that had a view of nothing and a scent of dust, mesquite smoke, and diesel. By dusk, people were drunk on Shinerbach and nostalgia. Kids ran wild around folding tables, grown-ups swapped stories over pit-cooked brisket, and the music from a busted cassette radio hissed out George Strait like it was clinging to life. The pit itself was something to gawk at, hand-welded by Uncle Levi sometime in the 70s, made from a repurposed oil drum sunk halfway into the earth, ringed with old bricks and rusted pipe. That pit had fed the family for decades. Levi was proud of it, too proud, some said. He used to tell the little ones that it was cursed, that he dragged it out of a dry creek bed where a church had once burned down in the 1920s. Said it still smelled like hymnals and wet dirt when it rained. Most folks wrote that off as Levi's usual hogwash. By 10 p.m., the meat had all been pulled off and the fire left to smolder, the coals buried under a fresh layer of mesquite chunks. Levi had been the last to tend it, standing over the pit with his leather gloves and that old beat-up welding mask he wore like it was a crown. A few folks noticed him muttering to himself, dropping something small into the coals, a pouch, maybe, or a folded bit of cloth, hard to say. The beer had been flowing all day and no one was paying close attention by then. Around midnight, the pit started to thrum. Not rattle, not shake like something man-made, but a slow, deep vibration that pulsed through the dirt like a low-frequency hum, the kind you don't hear so much as feel in your chest. A few people were still up, mostly the older cousins and uncles smoking cigars and arguing about football. The sound got their attention first. They thought it was an animal under the shed at first, maybe a raccoon or a boar. But the sound grew, louder, harsher, more mechanical. Then the lid, an iron slab with welded handles, started to rise up and down, not from the fire or from heat pressure, but like something underneath was pushing it, testing it. A rhythmic creak every few seconds. Someone hollered for Levi, but he wasn't around. Curtis, one of the older cousins, decided to lift the lid and see if maybe the pit had somehow flared up again. The moment he cracked it open, a geyser of smoke poured out. But it wasn't white or gray, not even the usual dark brown of hardwood smoke. It was pitch black and cold, like dry ice vapor, spilling over the sides and sinking to the ground. It didn't rise, it fell, like something rotten bleeding out into the air. Curtis recoiled, and that's when they all heard it. A sound from the pit, faint but clear. A kind of strained, guttural whimper. Not human, not animal. Something in between. Drawn out and unnatural. A howling, almost like wind funneled through a rusted pipe, but living. Some said later it sounded like a child in pain. Others swore it said something. Words, maybe. Not English. That was when Uncle Levi came running. Back. He shoved Curtis aside like he weighed nothing, slammed the lid shut with both hands, and sat on it. Didn't speak. Didn't look anyone in the eye. Just sat there, panting, staring off into the woods beyond the pasture where the fence had long since collapsed. The rest of the night, people sobered up real fast. No one wanted to get too close to the pit. One of the aunts started saying a prayer, and nobody told her to stop. The family didn't leave right away, though. You didn't leave a Slocum reunion without saying your goodbyes, no matter how weird. Things got by morning. Levi had dug a trench around the pit and was pouring bags of concrete mix into it, water from the garden hose slopping over the sides. He didn't ask for help, and no one offered. Everyone watched from a distance while he smoothed it over with a rusty trowel and pressed his palm into the wet surface, hard and long. When it dried, there were no initials, no cross, no words. Just the outline of his hand like a warning. He didn't stay for breakfast. Took off in his truck before the sun was fully up, the grill still streaked with soot. Nobody ever saw him again. After that, the pit was off limits. Doris fenced it off with chicken wire and planted cactus around. It said it was for the kids' safety, but the kids didn't go near it anyway. Something about that patch of ground made your skin crawl, like the air around it had gone sour. Levi's name stopped coming up. If you mentioned him, someone would change the subject or say, "Don't bring up Levi," and that would be that. Even Doris wouldn't talk about him, and she was his sister. Years passed. The family still met for reunions, though the attendance dwindled. By 2001, they were grilling on a propane setup and letting Rudy's cater. Nobody even walked past the old pit anymore. Then, in 2009, one of the great-nephews, a teenager named Jackson, hopped the wire and went poking around after too many beers. He never got closer than 10 feet before he started screaming. Sighed. He saw something moving under the concrete, just a ripple at first, like a fish brushing against the underside of a pond surface. Then a bulge, a shape that stretched the cement like a bubble about to burst. He ran until he collapsed, foaming at the mouth. Said something touched his mind. That's how he put it. Touched his mind. He doesn't talk anymore. Still lives in a care facility in San Marcos. Won't touch food if it's been cooked on a flame. A few years ago, a developer came sniffing around. Wanted to buy the land, tear down the old shed, put up condos or something. Doris said no. Not for sale. Last I heard, the concrete's still. There, cracked now in places, like something's been pushing upward. And every few years, someone hears a sound coming from under it. A howling. Not loud, just enough to make your spine curl. It was just after 9 p.m. when Dalton Briggs crossed into Presidio County, the high desert around him drowning in the last purples and blues of a dying day. The sky out here felt too big, like it was pressing down rather than opening up. He was low on gas, his old F-150, spitting up gravel on a lonely two-lane stretch that curved like a ribbon through dry scrub and ghost mesquites. He'd been driving for hours, coming down from Odessa, where he'd finished a roofing job that ran over schedule. He wanted to make it to Marfa before midnight, but the needle on the gas gauge was a hair above empty, the light blinking angrily. Dalton had driven these back roads plenty of times, but this particular stretch, somewhere between Redford and Shafter, felt off tonight. Not dangerous, not exactly. Just ... Quieter than usual. No other headlights for miles, no sign of cell signal, and not even the chirp of crickets or the distant bark of coyotes. Just the steady hum of his tires on old asphalt, and the faint clatter of tools shifting in his truck bed. That's when he saw the glow. It wasn't headlights or a house. It was the warm amber spill of light you only ever saw around old gas. Station's tungsten yellow, fuzzy around the edges, like it was bleeding out of time. As he came around a bend, it appeared, a small gas station with a tin canopy, one rusted pump, and a square cinder block building with a crooked Pepsi sign bolted above the door. There were no signs along the road for it. No name, no posted prices. Just there, humming quietly in the dark like it had always been. Dalton pulled in, gravel crunching under his tires. The place looked abandoned at first glance, but the lights were on inside. Fluorescent strips buzzed over shelves sparsely stocked with dusty cans of beans, hard candy in cracked jars, motor oil that looked 30 years old. Behind the scratched plexiglass counter stood a teenage girl with long black hair, wearing a faded Nirvana t-shirt and frayed Zhang shorts. She looked up when he entered, like she'd been waiting. Dalton offered a nod, heading straight to the pump with his credit card in hand. "Pump don't take cards," she said before he could ask. "Cash only." "Sorry." He hesitated. "How much for a fill-up?" "$40. That old Ford of yours ain't got much left in the tank." He blinked at her. "You eyeball my tank from in here?" She smiled, a little lopsided. "I got a feel for it." Dalton chuckled, dug out 2 20s from his wallet, handed them over. "Thanks. Didn't think I'd find anything open this far out." "Yeah," she said quietly. "Not much out here anymore." As the gas pumped, Dalton leaned against the truck, watching the girl through the glass. She didn't move much. Just stood behind the counter, arms folded, looking like she was trying hard to seem older than she was. Her skin was pale in the flickering fluorescent light, but something about her eyes caught him. They looked burnt out. Like she'd seen too much. When he finished filling up, he stepped back inside. The air was thick with heat and the scent of old oil and stale candy. "You got any coffee?" She shook her head. "Machine broke." "Been broke for years." He laughed, thinking it was a joke, but her face didn't change. "Well," he said, scratching the back of his neck, "guess I better hit the road." "Don't go too far tonight," she said, suddenly serious. "Strange things happen past Shafter after dark." Dalton raised an eyebrow. "That right?" Just stick to the highway if you can, and don't stop for nobody." There was something in the way she said it that made him uneasy, not the words, but the weight behind them. Still, he thanked her and climbed back into his truck. As he pulled away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The girl was still standing behind the counter, staring straight at him. He made it to Marfa without incident. Slept at the Thunderbird, thought about that gas station once or twice before sleep took him. The next day he finished his errands, loaded up on supplies, and headed back the same route. A week later, he was coming through Presidio County again. It was around the same time, just after dark. He kept an eye out for the station, figured he'd top off again. But when he reached the bend in the road, there was nothing. No lights. No building. Just sand and sagebrush. Dalton slowed down, turned around, drove the stretch 3 more times. Nothing. Not even a sign there had ever been a building there. The gravel pull-off was gone. The scrub looked like it hadn't been disturbed in years. Like no one had been there, no one could be there. He pulled off near a roadside diner an hour later, trying to wrap his head around it. He asked the waitress, a leathery old woman with big hair and cigarette breath, if there was an old gas station near Redford 1 with a single pump and a girl working the counter. Her eyes went wide. "Where'd you say you saw it?" He repeated the location, adding details. The tin canopy, the Pepsi sign, the girl with black hair. The waitress put her pad down. Her voice got real quiet. "That sounds like Annie's place. Her daddy ran it till the fire." "What fire?" "Back in 92, station caught out of nowhere in the middle of the night. Blew sky high. They never figured out what caused it. Folks said it might have been bad wiring or someone tossing a lit cigarette. Annie was working late, stocking shelves. She didn't make it out." Dalton stared at her, his stomach slowly. Turning to Ice Dot, the waitress nodded slowly. "Ain't nothing been there since. County scraped it down to sand. You couldn't even tell there was ever a station there if you didn't know." He told her the girl he saw wasn't hurt, wasn't burnt. She just seemed ... quiet, like she didn't want to be there. The waitress lit a cigarette right there behind the counter. Despite the no smoking sign, people say she still shows up sometimes. Travelers, truckers, always the same storyline. Gas station in the middle of nowhere, girl behind the glass, then gone the next time you come through. Dalton felt sick. He remembered the way she'd looked at him through the glass. Not angry, not sad. "Just tired. She warned me," he said softly. "Told me not to drive too far past Shafter. Told me not to stop for anybody." The waitress leaned in. "And did you?" He nodded. "I stayed on the highway. Didn't stop for nothing." She tapped ash into a paper cup. "Then I guess she liked you. Most folks who see her don't listen. We find what's left of him out near the Verona River. Car's upside down, doors open, no sign of him." Dalton never drove that route again. He took the long way around after that, even if it cost him hours. He told himself it was nonsense, just a trick of the light or a dream brought on by exhaustion. But every now and then, when he's driving late at night and sees a glow on the horizon, he slows down just in case. And in the rare moments he lets himself remember that night, the part that chills him most isn't the vanished station or the girl's pale, tired eyes. It's the way, when he handed her the cash and their fingers brushed, her skin felt like paper soaked in kerosene dry, soft and just waiting for a spark. On a sweltering July night just outside Bastrop, Texas, the air was thick with humidity and the scent of scorched pine. The pines out there have a way of leaning too close to the road, like they're trying to listen in on the secrets whispered between the trucks and old sedans that pass by. Raymond Haskins was one of those secrets. He'd been carrying it around for years like an oil drum chained to his ankle heavy. leaking and dangerously close to catching fire, he'd been driving. That night, without much of a plan, like he always did when the guilt started bubbling up. The bottle of Evan Williams on the passenger seat was mostly gone. His window was down, and classic country crackled from the radio, giving way now and then to static as he weaved along the 2-lane road that cut through the Bastrop State Park. The asphalt shimmered in the moonlight like water. His hands were steady, his eyes not so much. That stretch of Road County Road 1441 was cursed in its own quiet way. Folks said it had a knack for drawing out whatever you kept buried. Raymond had killed a man 10 years ago. No one knew, not really. It was one of those things that just slipped through the cracks of time and police work. A drifter named Cody Mendez. They'd argued in a bar in Elgin over nothing important to bet. A woman, a song on the jukebox, hell, maybe all three. Cody had followed Raymond out back, still mouthing off, and Raymond had grabbed the tire iron from his truck bed without even thinking. The first hit stunned him. The second broke his jaw. The third cracked his skull wide open. He'd buried him under a mesquite tree just east of Highway 21, on a piece of land he used to hunt on as a kid. It was private, fenced, forgotten. Every now and then he drove past that patch of land, expecting something to shift, some sign that it remembered. But the grass always grew back, the wind always blew the same, and nothing ever moved until that night he was rounding a bend, tires chewing at the gravel on the shoulder when the dog appeared. A mutt-black and matted, mid-sized, probably. Had some lab in it, but its eyes weren't right. Not that he got a good look at them before the bumper clipped it. Raymond hit the brakes too late. The thud was sickening and sharp, and the car skidded to a lurching stop. He cursed, hard hammering, and fumbled the door open. The night chirped and hummed with cicadas and frogs, but beneath it was something else. A hush, like the trees had, sucked in a collective breath. The dog was in the ditch, legs splayed awkwardly, head lifted slightly like it was trying to remember how to stand. It didn't whimper, didn't growl, just watched him. And then, with a sickening crunch of bone, it stood dotted limp onto the road, dragging one paw like a bag of wet sand. And then it looked at him. He shouldn't have done that. The voice was calm, flat, the way someone might say it if you spilled beer on their rug. It didn't echo, didn't vibrate the air, but Raymond heard it. Heard it in his ears, sure, but deeper too, in his chest. In the hollow places, he staggered backward. The bottle hit the gravel and shattered. The dog, if it was still a dog, watched him another second, then turned and limped into the trees on the left side of the road. Swallowed by shadows and pined-out Raymond stood there for what felt like hours, waiting for something else to happen. A growl, a scream, the sky to split open. But nothing came. He got back in the car and drove, fast and blind, all the way back to his trailer in Cedar Creek, where he locked the door and didn't sleep. Not that night. Not the one after either. He didn't tell anyone. What was there to say? That a dog spoke to him like a priest might speak to a sinner? That it looked into him, past all the years and excuses and lies, and pulled the truth out like a splinter? 2 days later, he walked into the Bastrop County Sheriff's Office and turned himself in. He told them everything about Cody Mendez, the tire iron, the grave under the mesquite tree. The detective stared at him like he was either crazy or brilliant, because up until that point, Cody had just been a name on a missing persons report from 2015. The file hadn't been opened in years. But Raymond told them where to dig, and when they did, they found bones. They also found the tire iron buried with him, still flecked with rust and dried blood. Raymond didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't flinch when they read him his rights, didn't fight when they put the cuffs on him. The only thing he said over and over was that the dog knew, that it had looked at him and known what he'd done. They ran a talk screen. He wasn't on anything. no drugs, no head trauma. His blood alcohol level that night had been just below the legal limit. He was clean, sane by all accounts. And yet, he wouldn't shut up about the dog. They thought maybe it was guilt, a mental break after 10 years of carrying a murder around. That made sense. Easier than believing some talking animal had wandered out of the woods to deliver backwoods justice. But that's not the end of it. Over the next few months, there were whispers. A deputy out in Red Rock swore he saw a dog just like the one Raymond described, black, limping, with eyes too human. Said it watched him from the tree line while he took a piss behind a gas station. A waitress near Rosanke told her sister about a mutt that sat outside the diner every Thursday, staring through the glass, never moving, never blinking, just watching. And an old man in Smithville, who hadn't spoken since his wife died, started mumbling in his sleep about something with a dog's face and a man's voice that waited for him in the hallway. None of these stories made the news. They were too scattered, too soft. But people in those parts started locking their doors earlier, started avoiding the roads after dark. And every now and then, someone would vanish, no foul play, no struggle, just gone, like they stepped out of their skin and melted into the woods. You can call it superstition, hill country nonsense, a string of coincidences and drunks seeing shadows where there were none. But not everyone thinks so. There's a theory floating around the campfires and truck beds that the dog comes for people with secrets, the ones who've done things they shouldn't have, who've buried something deep and think the dirt's enough to hide it. It doesn't judge, doesn't bark or bite. It just knows. It looks at you, and suddenly you remember everything you tried to forget. You see yourself through someone else's eyes, honest ones, and realize that nothing you've done is truly buried. Not out there anyway, because the woods remember Dot, and so does the dog. They say the bend on Highway 67 just south of Glen Rose wasn't always like that. Once upon a time, it was a straight shot, 2 lanes flanked by mesquite trees and barbed wire, the kind of Texas backroad you could drive with one hand on the wheel and the other hanging out the window. But sometime in the early 70s, the state rerouted a section of the road to avoid flooding near the Brazos River, and they carved that damned curve into the limestone hills. Locals called it Dead Man's Curve within 6 months. The accidents started slow. A cattle truck tipped on the shoulder one rainy night. A teenager going 90 in a souped-up Mustang skidded into a ditch, shattered both legs. But by 75, there were 6 fatalities in the span of 4 weeks, all on clear nights. No alcohol, no mechanical failure, just ... gone. Found upside down or burned out, twisted into the wire fence or thrown through the windshield with such force the sheriff swore one of them was nearly decapitated. He moved out of town a year later without saying why. Packed up his trailer and left his badge on the mayor's desk. People stopped taking that curve after dark. You'd see old-timers double back 15 miles through smaller roads just to avoid it. Then came the stories. Folks started whispering about lights, big ones, bright as day, brighter, even. A rancher named Cooper said he came around the curve just after midnight one summer and was hit with what he thought was a police spotlight. White light, huge and blinding, filled up the cab of his truck and stretched all the way into the fields on either side. He stopped in the middle of the road and watched figures moving in the glare, dozens of them. No faces, just silhouettes, twisting and bobbing like they were dancing, but there was no sound. He swore he'd turned off his engine and still couldn't hear anything. No insects, no wind, no rustling grass. Just the movements. He tried to reverse, but the truck wouldn't budge. When the lights finally blinked out 10 minutes later, his battery was dead, and every single wire under the hood had melted into a tangled black mass. His wife left him 3 weeks later because he stopped talking altogether. Just sat on the porch with a shotgun in his lap and a dog that wouldn't go near him. The county put up signs: slow down, dangerous curve, multiple fatalities, but the deaths kept happening. Then the lights came for me. It was October of last year. I was driving back from a job in Granbury, one of those contract gigs where you spend all day putting up drywall in a new build, only to drive home with dust in your teeth and your back aching like hell. My route usually took me through Claiborne, but there'd been a wreck on the main highway, so I cut south, taking backroads toward Glen Rose. I hadn't thought about Dead Man's Curve in years. Saw the sign around 11:50. The curve was less than a mile ahead. My gas tank was just under a quarter, and I was too tired to care. I told myself it was a myth. Old town gossip. Hell, maybe a trick of the headlights. Dust in the air. Or drunk teens playing with construction lights. Rational things, but the air felt wrong. It's hard to explain. The night was warm, but as I approached the bend, it felt like I'd rolled the windows down in winter. My breath fogged the inside of the windshield. The radio cut out. Not with a pop or static dash, just ... gone. Dead silence. Even my engine sounded muffled. Then the lights came. Not slowly. Not like a car approaching over a hill. They snapped on like a switch. 1 second I was staring at moonlit asphalt, the next my entire world was white. So white it was blue. Like someone had dragged stadium lights into the sky and aimed them at my eyes. I hit the brakes, but the truck kept rolling. My tires made no sound. The steering wheel was stiff, like it had locked up, and even with both hands gripping it, I felt like the wheel was pulling me. And the lights, they moved. Shadows? At least 20 at first. Then 30, then more. So many they blurred into each other, twisting and gliding in total silence. I thought of church revivals when I was a kid, people swaying in prayer, arms to the ceiling, faces contorted with religious ecstasy. That's what these shadows looked like, except they weren't praying. They weren't happy. They weren't anything. Just motion. Endless, silent, terrible motion. I couldn't look away. My body felt paralyzed, not like I was held, but like my brain had forgotten how to move. Something inside the light pressed into my chest. Not physically, not like weight, but like presence. Like something ancient and enormous was leaning in, observing. I don't know how long I sat there, but at some point the lights went out again. Not gradually, just off. One blink, and it was dark. The road was empty. My truck started on the first turn. Radio came back too, blaring some old country song I didn't recognize. I drove the rest of the way home with white knuckles, windows rolled up tight, and the heater blasting. But I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, at least not at first. I was too numb to feel anything. My house was dark and cold, but that's not unusual in October. I made coffee, turned on the TV. Around 3 a.m., I started hearing the whispers. They were faint. At first, I thought it was the pipes or the air unit. Then they got louder. Dozens of voices. Male, female, young, old, all at once. Some laughing. Some crying. Some chanting words I didn't understand. But none of them sounded panicked. They sounded ... expectant. I ripped up the floorboards that night. I know how it sounds, but I did. Tore up the living room and the hallway with a crowbar and flashlight. Nothing down there but dry earth and the same red ants that always nested under the slab, but the whispers kept going. I stayed at a motel for 3 days. Took sick leave from work. Tried to ignore the voicemail my neighbor left about people standing in your yard at night. When I finally went home, everything was quiet. But I never went near the curve again. I thought maybe it was over. until last week, when I got a package in the mail. No return address. Just a plain white envelope stuffed into my mailbox with my name in shaky handwriting across the front. Inside was a Polaroid, an old one with those faded brown edges and a yellow tint. It was a photo of the curve, taken at night. The headlights of the car behind the camera lit up part of the road, but the lights were already on. That same blinding white light flooding from somewhere out of frame. And in the center of the photo, standing in the glare, was a silhouette. Not dancing, not moving, just standing, looking straight at the camera, and behind it, behind the silhouette, were hundreds more, row after row, stretching back into the light like an army of shadows. Waiting. I flipped the photo over. One word scratched in with something sharp. Soon. They say the devil has a favorite stretch of road, and in South Texas, folks with more superstition than sense say it's FM 666, an old farm-to-market road that runs like a cracked spine through heat-warped fields and dead towns, the kind of place where cell signals vanish and gas stations shut their doors at sundown. There's no glamour to it, no gothic moss or looming pines, just mesquite scrub, rusting barbed wire, and wind that hisses like it's trying to tell you something you'd rather not hear. People talk about the heat making you see things. That's what the sheriff told me, at least. Mirages, heat lines, dehydration, he said with that leathery drawl and those tired, faded eyes. But I wasn't dehydrated when it happened. I was sober. I'd had a bottle of water in the Q folder and half a pack of sunflower seeds riding shotgun. I know what I saw. It started on a Tuesday, late August. The air outside was so thick with heat that the horizon shimmered like it was boiling. I'd left Corpus Christi after a weekend with my brother, nothing wild. Just beers, bullshit, and barbecue, and I was headed north, taking the long way back to San Antonio to avoid the I-37 construction mess. FM 666 runs diagonal, quiet and empty, perfect for someone wanting to cruise and clear their head. I had the windows down, music low, and nothing on my mind but the hum of the tires and the endless two-lane ribbon of faded blacktop. I first saw the van around mile marker 12, just past a gutted old grain silo. It was white, boxy, and looked like something a plumber might drive in the 90s. No logos, no rust, just clean, matte white, too clean. The thing had no plates front or back, not even the dealer sticker. The windows were tinted so dark it looked like someone had spray painted them black. No way it was legal. It came up behind me so fast I didn't even see it in the rear view until it was there right on my bumper, not 2 feet from my tailgate. I tapped my brakes lightly, not enough to slow much, just to let them know to back off, but the van didn't budge. No honk, no flashing lights. Just silent and steady. Too steady. I checked the speedometer. I was going 65, maybe 70, but the van never weaved, never fishtailed, just stayed right there, like it was tethered to me by an invisible cord. I rolled my window up and turned the music off. Something about the air had changed. The world had gone still, like the whole road had paused to watch. I gripped the wheel tighter and started scanning for a place to pull off and let it pass. But every shoulder looked too soft, too narrow, just dirt and brittle weeds that might crumble under the weight of my truck. Then, in the span of a blink, the van was gone. I mean gone. 1 second it was behind me, and the next it was in front of me, about 50 yards ahead, coasting silently. No turn, no passing, just blink. And it had teleported forward like a bad frame skip in a horror movie. I hit the brakes hard and skidded to a stop. The van didn't react. It didn't accelerate or swerve. It just kept rolling forward, slow and steady, before pulling to the side and stopping. Its brake lights never lit up. I sat there, engine idling, heartbeat in my ears. I don't scare easy, grew up in rough neighborhoods, saw things in Iraq that'd freeze most men, but that van made my spine go cold. I should have turned around. Should have found a different road, maybe even called someone. But curiosity's a cruel thing. So I inched forward, eyes locked on that white rectangle like it might flinch or twitch if I got too close. As I passed, I slowed to a crawl. The windows were so dark, I couldn't even make out a silhouette, not even the suggestion of a driver. But I swear, I heard something. Not a voice, not music. It sounded like children, kids, maybe a dozen, laughing and screaming. All at once, but wrong. Like it was being played backward on a busted cassette tape. And it was loud, too loud to be inside the van. I felt it in my chest, like it was vibrating through the glass. That's when the smell hit me. First was ammonia, sharp and chemical, like a hospital hallway. Then something else. Something warm and sweet and putrid, like a slaughterhouse on a hot day. I gagged and floored it. My tires kicked up dust and grit, and the van vanished behind me. I drove for hours after that, way past where I should have hit Highway 281. Somehow, I never saw another soul. No other cars. No turn-offs, just more road. And when I finally pulled into a gas station near Pleasanton, the sun had already dipped behind the hills and my fuel light was on. The clerk looked at me like I'd dragged a corpse through the front door. "You okay, man?" he asked. I nodded, still a little shaky. Long drive. He squinted. "You been out on FM 666? I hesitated, then nodded again. "Yeah." He sucked his teeth and shook his head. "Shouldn't do that after dark. Not since the van." I didn't answer, just started pumping gas. But he followed me outside like he had something to get off his chest. Supposed to be a prank. "They say," he muttered, eyes scanning the horizon like he expected to see it right then. "Started 10, 15 years back. Kids disappearing. Hitchhikers, a family or two. Cops never found the cars. Just tire tracks and scorch marks. And that smell? Ammonia?" I asked before I could stop myself. He froze. "And meat," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I drove the rest of the way home in silence. Didn't play music. Didn't call anyone. I parked in my driveway and sat in the truck until the porch light flicked on automatically. For weeks, I had dreams of that van, sometimes behind me, sometimes beside me, sometimes sitting in my driveway, engine off but humming somehow. Once, I dreamed I opened the door and found it empty, just darkness that went on forever, with little handprints on the inside of the walls. I tried to forget. I really did. But last weekend, a buddy of mine, Garrett, lives out in Alice, called me up. Said he was coming back from a job site late, took a shortcut through FM 666. He was laughing at first, just shooting the shit. But then he said, "Weirdest thing, gotta be some prankster. White van with no plates tailed me for 10 miles, then just disappeared. My mouth went dry. You hear anything?" He paused. "Now that you mention it, yeah." Thought my radio was screwing up, kept cutting to static, but it wasn't static. Sounded like, I dunno, like kids screaming underwater. He laughed. I didn't. Now it's happening more. I've seen posts online, not viral, not big, just scattered, like breadcrumbs. People talking about a white van that doesn't obey physics, doesn't show up in mirrors, doesn't stop. People who pulled over and said it disappeared behind them, leaving behind that same awful smell. One woman claimed she blacked out after the van passed her, and when she came to, it was 5 hours later and she was parked in her own driveway with the keys in her lap and the radio, whispering nursery rhymes in reverse. I keep thinking back to something the gas station clerk said as I pulled out. He leaned into the window and said, "You know what's funny? Nobody ever sees it in the same place twice. But it always knows where you're going, like it's not chasing you, it's waiting. I don't take FM 666 anymore. I don't drive. After sundown, either. I keep a dog now, and every night she barks at the same corner of the yard, tail between her legs, teeth bared. Nothing there. Not that I can see, anyway. But sometimes, just before dawn, I smell ammonia. And meat. And I hear tires crunching gravel. And I pray to whatever's listening that it just drives past, because I don't want to see where it's been. I sure as hell don't want to know where it's going. They say the rain comes down harder in Hondo, Texas. Not faster. Not more of it. Just heavier somehow. Like it presses down on your shoulders thick as sin. It brings a silence with it too. The kind that settles in the bones and makes you feel like you're underwater, even when you're standing on dry land. Out on those long stretches of farm to market roads, where the mesquite trees lean crooked and the fences are more rust than wire, you feel it strongest. That stillness. That weight. And if you've lived here long enough, say, since before 2003, you know not to be out there when the storms come through. Not because of the rain, because of what stands in it. The first time someone talked about him, really talked about him, was in the fall of 2003, September 8th, just after midnight. A ranch hand named Eli Trujillo was driving back from Divine. A back route he took along FM 462 to avoid the Border Patrol checkpoint. He told the deputy later that he saw a naked man on the side of the road, standing under the downpour, barefoot and lit up from the inside like coals in a mesquite fire. Just standing there, still as stone. His skin looked burned but not blistered smooth. Shiny black like the inside of a pit barbecue smoker. Eli didn't stop. He said he tried to look away but couldn't. Said the man's eyes weren't eyes at all. Just hollow pits glowing red dot. They chalked it up to tequila and exhaustion. Eli was let go from the ranch 2 months later, ended up drifting. Nobody thought much of his story. But then came 2004 and another sighting. And another. Always in the rain. Always on some godforsaken stretch of road around Hondo or Yancey. Never closer to town. Naked. Smoldering. Silent. Never moving, not even to blink. One of the most talked about sightings came from a woman named Vanessa. Real. July 2006. She was a dental hygienist from Castroville, driving to her cousin's wedding in Sabinal. She got caught in a storm on FM 471. She was late and stressed, fiddling with the radio when her headlights lit him upright in the middle of the road. She braked, thinking he'd move, thinking maybe he was a drunk or high, but he didn't budge. She stopped the car, rolled the window down halfway. That's when she saw the smoke. She told the police and later the reporter from the Hondo, Anvil Herald, that he wasn't steaming from the rain like a normal person would be. He was burning. Smoke curled out from the top of his head, his elbows, between his fingers. There was no fire. Just the low red glow under the blackness of his skin. She sat there for 30 seconds before panic set in. She threw the car in reverse, turned around, and never made it to the wedding. She said it wasn't just what she saw, it was what she felt. Like her memories had gone foggy. Like she'd been doused in warm oil. She couldn't hear the rain anymore. Couldn't feel her fingers. And when she looked in her rearview mirror, he was gone. They printed her story with the headline, "Woman claims burned man blocked road." It made the rounds. Teenagers dared each other to find him. No one did. Or if they did, they didn't talk about it. Then came the one that changed everything. It was 2009 when Martha Sutherland, a retired schoolteacher, saw him. This was the case that went further than whispers and yellowed clippings. She lived out on CR 429 in a creaky ranch-style house near an abandoned pecan grove. A storm came down hard one Saturday night, hail, thunder, the works. She was standing in her kitchen making hot tea when her porch light flickered, then went out. That's when she saw him standing on her front lawn, just beyond the fence, naked, still, smoke coiling off him. Even through the rain, she'd heard of him. Everyone in Hondo had by then, but curiosity or perhaps senility got the better of her. She took a flashlight, walked out to the porch and called out, "Sir, you all right?" No answer. He didn't move. She said the light beam didn't bounce off his skin like it should have. It seemed to vanish into it like a sponge soaking up water. She stepped off the porch. The ground was muddy. Her slippers sank. The flashlight flickered, died. Then she reached for him. She thought he was a hallucination, maybe. A trick of the weather. Her fingers brushed his left forearm. She felt heat, not warmth, heat like a stove burner turned high. Pain shot through her hand and she screamed. The doctors at Medina Regional told her the tissue on her index, middle and ring fingers was necrotic, like she'd plunged her hand into acid. They amputated all three at the first knuckle. Her story was documented, investigated, dismissed, but nobody in Hondo questioned her, because they knew she was sane, known her for 50 years, taught half the town's kids. After that, the sightings slowed. Fewer people wanted to admit seeing him. A man named Cody Verrett claimed he saw the burned man standing by the railroad tracks off Highway 90 in 2010, but he was drunk and fighting a divorce, so folks brushed it off. Still, the legend stuck. Tourists started asking about him. Podcasts did episodes. A documentary crew from Austin came through and filmed B-roll of empty fields and wet pavement, but left without anything useful. Then, in 2011, he vanished completely. For 3 years, no sightings, no stories. Just the occasional older man at a bar leaning in to say he once saw smoke where there shouldn't have been smoke, just south of Seminole, but it was probably nothing. And then, last year 2024, a girl named Rena Chavez disappeared. She was 21, lived in Hondo her whole life, smart, liked poetry, didn't party. She drove home from her part-time job in Uvalde one rainy night in March and never made it home. Her car was found just outside Hannes, driver's side door open. Headlights still on. No blood, no prints, no sign of struggle. Just a single blackened handprint, burned into the hood of her car. That brought the stories roaring back. People started connecting the dots. The rain, the roads, the disappearances. But there was one more piece nobody talks about unless they've been here long enough. Back in 1978, there was a fire out near Twin Buttes, west of Hondo. A trailer home went up in flames. Nobody knew what caused it, maybe faulty wiring, maybe arson. They pulled a man's body from the wreckage. No ID, no name. Burned beyond recognition. They buried him in a pauper's grave in the Hondo Cemetery, just marked John Doe 1978. A rumor started that he'd been squatting in the trailer, cooking meth. But old-timers remember something else. They remember the man wasn't burned black like you'd expect. He was burned red, the color of a hot ember. And even dead, he was warm to the touch. The mortician quit the next day. No one knows if that man is the burned man, or if the burned man is something older, stranger. Maybe he was never a man at all. Maybe he's something the rain woke up, some old piece of the earth that got angry when the sky wept too long. All I know is this: when you see a figure on the road in the rain, and he's naked and smoking like a brush fire, don't stop. Don't speak. Don't reach out your hand, because if you touch him, he touches back. They say the bridge was built back in the 1930s, when the WPA was putting half the country to work laying down roads and pouring concrete in places that barely had names. That's how it always starts, doesn't it? some forgotten slab of history, left to rot just outside the edges of the map. The old Medina Bridge sat 3 miles outside of Castroville, tucked into a bend of the Medina River where the water narrowed and grew deep and slow. Not many people use the road anymore since the new bypass was built, and even fewer had reason to stop at the bridge, unless they were hunting or dragging beer coolers out into the woods. But it had a reputation, one of those whispered about. Places kids turn into dares and dares turn into stories. And then, sometimes, the stories turn into something worse. They said if you stood under that bridge alone, sometime between midnight and 3, you'd hear it. A baby, not wailing, just ... crying, soft and sick and steady. Like something that wasn't quite alive anymore, but wasn't done yet either. The kind of cry that makes your stomach clench and your mouth go dry, like your body knows before your brain catches up. The rules were always the same. You had to be alone. You had to stay under the bridge for at least 10 minutes. And no flashlights, only the moon. If you were lucky, it had been just another story until Kyle Pierce did it. This was October of 2017, back when the drought had wrung the Medina damn near dry, and the bridge sat over more gravel than water. Kyle was 17, lanky and sharp-faced, the kind of kid who lived off Monster Energy drinks and fights with his stepdad. He had that look in his eye, the one that wanted to piss on something sacred just to see if anyone would stop him. He wasn't even dared, really. Someone brought up the story at one of those Friday night bonfires behind the grain silo, and Kyle grinned that coyote grin and said, "I'll go. Right now. Y'all want to watch?" He went down there alone. We all stayed parked along the road. Above the bridge, headlights aimed out at the trees. Someone had a timer going. 10 minutes. We watched the shadow shift under the bridge, looking for his skinny silhouette in the dark. He walked slow, didn't look back, just slipped down the incline and disappeared under the concrete. At first, everything was quiet. Then, about 4 minutes in, a couple of us said we heard something. A whimper. Like a baby, sure, but not really. It was off. Too slow, too rhythmic. Like a recording looped over and over, only parts of it were wrong, like the noise was breaking apart the longer it played. A few of us laughed it off nervously. Others started whispering, maybe trying to convince themselves it was a prank. One guy, Caleb, started muttering a prayer under his breath, gripping the cross around his neck like a lifeline. When 10 minutes passed, Kyle didn't come back. We waited. Another 5, 10, and then he walked out slow like he was sleepwalking. His eyes were glassy, his face slack. Someone yelled his name and he didn't respond. Just climbed up the bank and stood there blinking like he didn't know who we were. And then he started talking. It took us a few seconds to realize something was wrong with the way he spoke. The cadence was all off, like a recording played backward. Someone pulled out their phone, recorded it. Later, we'd run it through editing software and confirm it. He was speaking in reverse. Not gibberish, just reversed English. Clear as day once we flipped it. And the first thing he said, when translated, "It's not a baby. He wouldn't touch water after that. Not to drink, not to shower." His mom tried to force him. He slapped the glass out of her hand and screamed like she'd tried to poison him. He stopped eating too, except for raw meat. They found the remains of a raccoon behind their garage, bones picked clean. A week later, he was gone. Vanished from his room in the middle of the night. No broken windows, no forced doors. The only thing left was a baby rattle sitting in the fenda, middle of his bed. Old wooden, spotted with blood. Not his? That's when the stories turned mean. Not just a ghost story anymore. Something worse. Something ... watching. I didn't go down there until last year. Not for a dare. I'd been thinking about Kyle. He was my cousin. We were close when we were kids, before his dad bailed and his mom went through 2 more boyfriends and stopped coming to family dinners. I hadn't seen him in years when he vanished, but something about it stuck. That rattle. The backwards talking. I couldn't let it go. So I drove out there. October again. Fitting. The bridge looked smaller than I remembered. Weathered. Chipped paint and rust-stained concrete. The water below was black and still. I parked off the side of the road and walked down the incline. Moon was out, full. No wind. The air changed the second I stepped under the bridge. Heavy, like walking into a room with the windows sealed shut. My ears popped. I didn't hear anything at first, just the quiet hum of crickets and the creak of shifting trees. Then, faint, almost imperceptible, the crying began. It wasn't a baby. Or if it was, it wasn't just a baby. There was something else layered beneath the sound. Wet breathing. A rasp like meat dragged across gravel. I could feel it in my teeth, in my bones. It wasn't coming from any one direction. It was everywhere. Like it lived in the concrete, in the mud, in the echo itself. And then I smelled it. Sour milk, rotting leaves. Something chemical, like bleach. I wanted to leave. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but I made myself stay. 10 minutes. I had my watch out. I was going to finish what Kyle started. Figure it out. Understand. About 6 minutes in, I saw it. Not clearly. Just a shape. Small, hunched, scuttling along the underside of the bridge like an insect. Pale limbs. A too big head. It didn't move right, jerky, like broken animation. And the crying got louder. Warped. I stepped back. It stopped moving, and it looked at me. There were no eyes. Just smooth, wet skin. But I felt it watching. Deep inside my skull. My nose started bleeding. My vision blurred. And then this is the part I still don't understand. It opened its mouth and said my name, not out loud. Not like speaking. It was inside my head, clearer than any spoken word I'd ever heard. Ethan, it said. Stay. I ran. I didn't look back. I crawled up the bank on all fours, hands scraping against rocks. I jumped in my truck, tore out of there so fast I almost flipped it on the first turn. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I kept hearing it. That voice, that baby cry with something else inside it. I started seeing things. Shadows under my bed, wet footprints in the hall. My cat vanished. My dog refuses to go near my room. I tried to tell people. They looked at me the way people look at car crashes, curious, horrified, and grateful it wasn't them. Last week. I found a rattle on my pillow, not Kyle's, older, cracked wood. Stained with something dark and sticky. It's sitting on my desk now. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because part of me knows it's not done. That thing under the bridge, it's hungry, it's curious. I think when Kyle went down there, he let it in. And when I followed, I gave it something else. Maybe it needs us to see it, hear it. Remember it. It's been crying more lately. Not just at night. I hear it in the walls now. In the drain whence I brush my teeth. In the wind. If you ever hear it, if you're ever walking alone and you hear something small and wet and scared, don't go looking, because it's not a baby, and it's not alone anymore. The ranch sat just west of Odessa, where the scrub turned coarse and the sky opened up into that wide, hard blue that only Texas seemed to manage. The kind of place where the wind never stopped moving, even on a still day, and dust had a way of getting into your teeth, your boots, your blood. The land out there wasn't good for much except cattle and hard living, and that was fine by Del Bishop. He'd inherited the place from his uncle, a bitter, half-crazy bastard who'd raised longhorns until the day he dropped dead in the middle of the south pasture, his boots half sunk in the mud, a branding iron still clutched in one shaking hand. Dell had no love for the land, not really. But he'd been laid off from the refinery, his third in 6 years, and the house was paid for. So he moved out there in February, brought a few head of cattle down from Amarillo, and figured he'd give ranching a try, just long enough to see if he could make it work. It was supposed to be temporary. Everything he did was supposed to be temporary. The first few weeks passed quiet enough. Lonely, sure, and rougher than he expected, mending fences, chasing off coyotes, treating one of his heifers for a bad hoof. Infection, but manageable. Until the cattle started spooking. He'd find them clustered tight together in the farthest corners of the pasture. Eyes wide, breath huffing white clouds into the dawn. A few of them limping, a few bloodied, one with what looked like bite marks along its haunch. At first he figured it was just a big cat, maybe a bobcat that had gotten bold, or even a stray pack of dogs. But he never saw prints. Never heard the usual signs, no yips, no snarls in the night. Just the cattle, getting more and more anxious. Some mornings, they'd be huddled so hard against the south fence he'd have to coax them off with grain, and cussing just to get them moving. Then came the night of the lowing. That's what Dell called it later, the lowing. The sound of cattle wailing, not bellowing or mooing but crying, real and mournful, like children in the dark. It started at 3:30 in the morning sharp. Woke him straight up from a dead sleep, heart already hammering in his chest like he'd been running. The house shook with it, the walls thin and old, the windows trembling in their panes. He grabbed his shotgun and rushed out, but by the time he got to the porch, the noise had stopped. Just the wind and the creak of the water pump. He shone his flashlight over the fields. Saw nothing but a few dark shapes out near the fence, too far to make out, but they were still, frozen, like statues. And all looking the same direction toward the far west edge of the property. Dell didn't sleep the rest of the night. Instead, he pulled an old thermos of coffee out of the cabinet, set up a lawn chair on the back porch, and sat until the sun cracked the horizon in bleeding pinks and oranges. As the light came up, he spotted something strange along the fence line, a long trail of disturbed dirt. Like something had dragged itself along the ground, but without the consistency of a tire or boot print. A smooth, slithering track that twisted and looped like a snake on amphetamines. That day, he bought trail cameras. 6 of them, good ones with infrared and motion sensors. Mounted them all along the western fence, high up on the posts, far from the reach of animals or vandals. The system sensed to his phone, so he'd get pinged whenever anything moved. That night, he waited. And sure enough, at exactly 3:33 a.m., every one of his cameras went off. Simultaneously, the alerts poured in like a digital scream. Dell didn't check them right away. His gut told him not to, told him whatever he saw wasn't going to make any damn sense. But curiosity's a hell of a thing, and fear doesn't always win, even when it should. He opened the app. The footage was grainy. A shimmer of gray and black and static, and then movement. Something coming into frame. Not walking, not quite. Crawling either. It moved too fluidly for a man, too deliberately for an animal. Dell squinted, leaned in, and felt his stomach flip like a fish on hot concrete. It looked like a centipede, but wrong. Huge. 10, maybe 12 feet long, with limbs, arms, too many arms jointed in unnatural ways. Bent back, bent sideways, twitching, and swaying, and it had skin, human skin. Pale, like it had never seen the sun, stretched tight over the segmented frame. No eyes, no mouth. Just a suggestion of a face, black as butcher paper. It moved with a kind of grotesque elegance, following the fence exactly. Step by jerking step, claw by claw. It never looked at the camera. But each camera, one by one, shorted out just as the creature passed. And the next morning, when Dell went to check the units in person, he found them all damaged. Deep scratches across the lenses. Not from claws or hooves or weather. These were deliberate, like fingernails. 5 long gouges, as if a hand had reached out and tried to blind them. Dell didn't speak, didn't breathe for a full minute. Just stood out there in the rising heat, sweat sliding down his neck, feeling the weight of something wrong. Something that didn't belong in the world as he understood it. He checked the footage again. Watched the creature move. It was rhythmic, predictable, always starting at the same point on the fence, always ending at the same spot near the back of the property, like it was tracing a path, like it was waiting. Dell didn't tell anyone. Who would believe him? He just sat with it. 3 more nights, 3 more passes. Same thing every time, same motion, same destruction. Until the 4th night, when it changed. That night, the cameras triggered at 3:33 a.m., but only 4 of them. Then 3, then 2. Then silence. The next morning, he found the last 2 cameras shredded completely, torn off the posts. Wires frayed. Plastic twisted like it had been melted from the inside out. And the trail, the slithering, dragging track, didn't stop at the fence this time. It crossed into the pasture, headed toward the barn. He went inside and found his prize bull, Big Jack, dead, torn open, not eaten. Just opened like a zipper had been run down its belly. Everything inside rearranged. Not pulled out, rearranged. Like someone had tried to understand what made it work and then gave up. Dell left that afternoon, packed his clothes, took what cash he had, and drove into Odessa without even locking the front door. Put the land up for sale that night. By the end of the week, it was gone, sold cheap to a drilling outfit that probably didn't care what the land had been. Just a few hundred acres of dirt and fence and bad dreams. He never told the buyer. Just handed over the keys and said, "Hope you've got good cameras," and walked off. But sometimes, late at night, in motel rooms along the interstate, Dell still checks the time. Always at 3:33. And sometimes, if he's near a window, swears he can hear it. A faint scraping. A soft dragging sound. Like something long and jointed, wearing a man's skin, remembering his scent. Still walking. Still watching. Still waiting to be seen. They say it starts right around the old mile marker that ain't there no more. Used to be a rusted green sign with a bullet hole through the number 66. Long since pulled out by the state after too many folks stopped to take pictures. It stood along that nowhere stretch between Encinal and Freer, on the forgotten bones of Highway 44, where the mesquite grows thick and the buzzards circle low and lazy. That's where it happens. That's where they say you start to laugh. It's not the kind of laughter that comes with joy or even confusion. It's something else, manic, wrenching, like a dry heave of the soul. Most don't talk about it. The ones who do, their eyes don't focus quite right afterward. They say it hits you all at once, like a switch flipping inside your chest. First comes the grin, then the chuckle. Then the full-throated, howling laughter that peels out of you like bark off a dying tree. A couple of them had to be sedated, strapped to gurneys like madmen, the laughter still echoing in their throats as the EMTs wheeled them into regional hospitals in Laredo or Corpus. No one can agree on how long it lasts. Some say it's 30 seconds. Others swear it goes on for miles. A trucker named Clay Runnels told the local paper he laughed so hard his vision blacked out. Woke up with his rig halfway buried in a culvert, windshield spiderwebbed, one rib cracked in 2 places and the taste of blood in his mouth. Said it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard, though he couldn't tell you the joke. That's how it always goes. They laugh, They crash, and when it's over, they can't remember what was so damn funny. The highway itself is nothing. 2. Narrow lanes with crumbling shoulders and faded lines, cutting a crooked scar through South Texas brush country. The landscape is flat and hot and endless, dotted with rusting fence posts, dead cows, and abandoned gas stations that bake in the sun like empty skulls. The road curves gently, almost imperceptibly, around low rises and dry creek beds that haven't seen water in 20 years. It's a road people only take if they have to, a connector between smaller towns even Texans barely remember. But somewhere, out there, past the halfway mark, just before the terrain flattens completely, is the Laughing Mile. Locals don't like to talk about it. They'll roll their eyes if you ask at first, claim it's just a story truckers tell to keep themselves awake. But you can see it in their faces, the twitch of the jaw, the sudden interest in their beer bottles, the way they shift their weight and change the subject. There's history buried out there, something most would rather forget. Because it didn't. Start with Clay Runnels or the tourists or the TikTokers who came chasing the so-called devil's joke. It started back in 1976. There was a woman named Imelda Vargas. She lived alone in a trailer outside Encinal, worked nights as a shift manager at the old Alsops on Main. Quiet type. Church every Sunday, always had a bowl of mints at her register. One night, she didn't show up for her shift. Manager figured she overslept or maybe got sick. But the next morning, the state troopers found her sedan twisted up like a pretzel 200 yards off the shoulder near mile marker 66. She was still strapped into the driver's seat, eyes wide open and face frozen in what one deputy called the most godawful grin I've ever seen. Her jaw had dislocated. One side of her face was torn from laughing, skin cracked and stretched like sun-dried hide. Autopsy didn't show drugs or alcohol. No stroke. No seizure. Just burst blood vessels in her brain and a snapped hyoid bone from prolonged violent laughter. They couldn't even close her mouth for the funeral. More followed. A school bus driver named Lennox Mason drove his route empty one afternoon and was found parked in the brush 10 miles off course, laughing and beating his fists against the dash until the bones shattered. A pair of surveyors working for TXDOT quit the job halfway through that section of the highway, claimed they heard laughter bleeding in from the trees. Said the wind was whispering knock-knock jokes they couldn't quite understand. One ended up in a sanitarium in San Antonio. The other shot himself in a motel outside Uvalde 3 months later. No one ever found a cause. No gas leaks, no electromagnetic anomalies, no strange frequencies or weird wildlife. Just that stretch of cracked asphalt and heat waves rippling. Above it like smoke from a funeral pyre. But the stories kept coming. Some swore it was a cursed mile of road built over an old massacre site. Others blamed it on a radio tower that had been torn down in the late 60s, saying it was still transmitting something from beyond. The older ones, the real old-timers with boot-scuffed jeans and skin like creased leather, they'd mutter. About the jester, they said there was something out there that laughs with you. Or at you. No one could say for sure. Some claimed they saw a figure standing in the mesquite, half-shadowed, face white and stretched like a porcelain doll's, mouth locked in an eternal grin. One man said it ran alongside his car at 60. Miles an hour, barefoot, arms dangling like wet ropes, grinning through the glass. Another said he passed a hitchhiker in a dirty yellow suit with eyes like coin slits, who looked right at him and mouthed a joke he couldn't hear, and that's when the laughter began. But the strangest case, the one that really drove it home, for me, was a man named Carson Lee, retired Navy, 63 years old. Lived alone in Freer after his wife passed. Quiet, clean record. One night, he called 911 from his truck, screaming through laughter so violent it shook the line. They had to trace the call. Found him parked sideways across both lanes, engine idling. He was still alive barely. Eyes rolled back, face purple, blood on his shirt from where he'd bitten through his tongue. In his passenger seat was a notepad, with one sentence scribbled over and over in shaky handwriting. I finally get the joke. He didn't survive the night. I've driven the Laughing Mile twice in my life. First time, I was 18, too dumb to believe the stories. Nothing happened. Just an empty road and a sweaty steering wheel and the radio cutting out like it always does in the sticks. But the second time last year was different. I wasn't looking for trouble. Just trying to make it from Cotulla to Alice before dark. I was tired, maybe a little drunk from the wake I'd come from, but not enough to imagine what I saw. Around the point where the land dips and the grass goes yellow brittle, I felt it hit me like a wave. Not laughter. Not yet. Just ... anticipation. Like something leaning over your shoulder, waiting for the punchline. I gripped the wheel tighter. The radio popped and hissed and then fell silent. That's when I saw it. Something up ahead, standing just off. The shoulder dot at first I thought it was a scarecrow. Tall, bent, dressed in what looked like a faded yellow clown suit, arms too long, hands slack. It didn't move, but I swear to God, it smiled. Not a twitch, not a grin, just a wide, deliberate, impossible smile that didn't belong on any living face. My chest tightened. My eyes watered. And I felt it bubbling up from my gut, not fear. Laughter. Dry, involuntary, echoing laughter that felt like it belonged to someone else. I jammed my fist against my thigh, bit my tongue, screamed over it. I think that's the only reason I'm still here to write this. When I looked in the rearview mirror, it was gone. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I drove until my tank hit empty and the sun was gone, and when I finally pulled over in some busted Shell station in George West, I cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes. You can laugh at the stories. Everyone does. They think it's just a ghost tale or a piece of local color for drunk old men to slur over poker. But it's real. Something out there is waiting, crouched in that stretch of road like a tick under the skin. It doesn't need chainsaws or blood to scare you. It just waits for you to hear the joke ... and when you do, it laughs with you ... forever. In Jasper County, nestled between clawing pine thickets and winding, godless roads that curve like snakes trying to disappear into the hills, there's a house people don't talk about unless they're drunk or dying. It doesn't show up on county surveys, no deeds or blueprints, no postal address. Hell, even Google Street View skips it like it knows better. You only find it if you're lost or looking for it with a kind of desperate curiosity that makes the back of your tongue. Locals just call it the house with no door, not because the door is gone, not boarded up or bricked over, but because it never had one. Never a frame, no hinges, not even a cut in the siding where a door might have gone. Just 4 mold-slick walls of sagging gray wood and 6 tall. Narrow windows, 2 on each long side and 1 on each end set like eyes in a skull. The glass is thick and dark and dirty, the kind that drinks light instead of reflecting it. Yet if you get close enough, you can see through. That's what they say. It squats off a trail that stopped being used sometime around the Carter administration, past a dried-up creek bed and a rusted fence line that marks the old Miller property, though the Millers have been dead for decades. Their farmhouse rotted out and collapsed years ago, but the house with no door remains untouched. Not new, not old, just there. Immovable. UNWELCOMING. Kids dare each other, of course. That's how it goes in every backwater Texas town where boredom's as thick as the humidity and twice as dangerous. Dares pass between middle schoolers and high schoolers, a rite of passage more effective than any sermon in town. Most just stand in front of the glass and press a finger to it, daring the darkness to blink back. But one boy, Tyler Mossaby, went a little further. Not much, just a hand on the window, palm flat. That was enough. He screamed. Not like a startled kid, not like someone pulling a prank. He screamed like his spine was being pulled through his stomach, like something inside him tore and kept tearing. When his friends pulled him back, he kept screaming. Then he stopped, just like that. No tears, no words, no breath. He hasn't spoken since. They took him to a hospital in Beaumont, then Houston. Psych Evils. CAT scans, nothing. No trauma, no. Stroke, no signs of physical damage. Just a vacant stare and a throat that won't make sound. Like the act of seeing something had cauterized whatever parts of him processed the world. He drew one picture, once, in crayon, his family hanging upside down inside that house. Still alive, eyes open, mouths gaping like fish out of water. After that, he wouldn't hold a crayon again. Word got around, of course. Jasper County isn't big. News runs faster than trucks. Rumors faster still. After Tyler, even the older kids stopped going out there. The forest reclaimed the trail with a kind of hungry joy, branches reaching out like fingers trying to pull the curious in. But some things don't stay buried. I found the place in '98. I was 24, coming back from a night shift at the refinery off FM 1004 when I missed a turn and took an old logging road by mistake. I'd lived in Jasper most of my life, thought. I knew every shortcut and deer trail like the lines on my own palm, but somehow I ended up driving through a patch of woods I didn't recognize. The trees leaned too close together, their limbs overlapping like a ribcage closing in. My radio fuzzed out. Cell phone died. GPS blinked like it was trying to remember how to exist, and then I saw it. I didn't know the story then. Didn't know about the dare or the drawings or the boy who stopped speaking. I only knew what I saw: an old, window-eyed house sitting in a clearing that felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Not spooky, not haunted. Wrong, like a butcher's apron at a Sunday school picnic. I stopped the truck. Got out. I don't know why. Something about the place made my legs move without checking in with the rest of me. Like I was being tugged by a leash I couldn't see. The air got thick the closer I walked, not hot but heavy, like walking underwater. My boots crunched over dead leaves and brittle twigs that snapped too loudly. I stopped 10 feet from the house. No door. Windows staring straight at me. Inside. I couldn't quite make it out, not details. But I swear to God, there was movement. Slow. Fluttering. Like something was turning just behind the glass, shifting like leaves stirred by breath. I don't remember going closer. Just that suddenly, I was standing right next to the window on the north side, hand raised, palm almost touching the glass. It pulsed cold, like holding dry ice. And then I saw something behind the reflection. Not my own face, something wearing. It, twisted, pale, hair too long. Skin hanging in folds like melted wax, and eyes blank and yawning and endless. I stumbled back, nearly pissed myself. Got in the truck and drove like hell was chasing me. I didn't stop until I hit Highway 96, where the trees opened up and the night felt like night again. I didn't talk about it for years. Not until I heard what happened to Tyler. Then it all started clicking. The house is hungry, not for food. Not for flesh, for recognition, for attention. It's a wound in the world, and the more people who know about it, the wider it stretches. It wants to be remembered. Like a sickness that spreads through stories. It doesn't need you to go inside. It doesn't let anyone in, not in the traditional sense, but it shows you things. Maybe what's waiting for you. Maybe what it's already taken. I started looking into old county records. What little I could find. There was a logging camp in that area back in 1912, 40 men. All vanished over one winter. No signs of struggle. No blood. Just their cabins left behind like abandoned dollhouses, fires still burning in some stoves. The only thing found during the search was a journal from one of the foremen, a man named Cass Wyatt. It was water damaged, pages stuck together with mildew, but the last entry read, "The house wasn't here yesterday. It doesn't want us to go in. It wants us to look. I saw my boy inside. He's been dead 3 years. But he looked up when I passed the glass. He smiled." That journal's kept in the Historical Society building downtown, but they don't display it. It's under lock and key in the back, and the lady who works there always says it's out for restoration if anyone asks. I had to slip in after hours with a crowbar just to get a look. And that's the thing, it keeps happening. A missing hiker. A kid from a church group vanishing during a nature walk. A drunk who stumbled off into the woods and came back 3 days later, covered in dirt and pine needles, eyes rolled back in his head. When he came to, all he said was, "It knows my name. There's no stopping it. The house can't be burned or torn down." A group tried, once some local Baptists, convinced it was the work of the devil himself. They brought gasoline, chainsaws, prayer books. None of them came back. Sheriff's office called it a bear attack in Jasper County. In August, I go out. There's sometimes I don't get close, not anymore. I sit in my truck 100 yards off and wait until night falls. And I watch. The windows light up now, not with lamps or candles. With people, or shapes shaped like people. Their faces pressed to the inside of the glass. Mouths moving like they're screaming, but no sound comes out. I swear I saw my mother once. She died of cancer when I was 17. But there she was inside, her head tilted wrong, one eye twitching like a moth under skin. Sometimes, when the wind dies and the cicadas stop, I can hear it. Not a voice. A rhythm, like breathing. Like the house itself is inhaling, waiting. Tyler Mossaby sits on his parents' porch now, every day. Doesn't eat much, doesn't blink often, but he draws. Over and over, with charcoal and pencil, and once even with the blood from a nosebleed he didn't seem to notice. And every drawing is the same, the house with no door, and inside it, faces, some. Of them I recognize, some of them I don't. But I'm starting to see mine in there too. It was one of those brutally still summer mornings in Palo Pinto County, the kind where the air doesn't so much move as it hangs like wet flannel around your neck. People in Mineral Wells remember that stretch of Highway 180 west of town, just past the rust-bitten gas station with the sun-faded shell sign and the boarded-up fireworks stand. Back in '89, there used to be a dip in the road where the asphalt had this slight buckle to it, like the land itself was trying to shrug the whole thing off its back. That's where the sign stood, the original one, just a plain old green. Road marker reading CR 4,870 to 2 miles. Nothing unusual about it. Until June 3 RD. It started with Earl Prentice, who worked for the county. Maintenance crew, 3rd rotation. Earl was a quiet man, drank Pepsi for breakfast and listened to Rush Limbaugh on the truck radio. That morning, around 6:10 a.m., he pulled off to check on some busted reflector posts. When he walked past the road sign, he thought someone had sprayed it with red paint. Kids, maybe. It happened, except this was dripping, not dry. Thick, dark red rivulets running down both sides of the post like someone had poured a bucket of animal blood over it. Earl touched it. Later, in the sheriff's report, he said it felt warm. Not like sun-warmed metal, different, alive warm. When he wiped it with a rag, the red soaked through and didn't smear like paint or oil. It had a smell too, metallic and sour, like rusted meat. He threw up on the roadside, told his supervisor. By noon, the sign was gone. They put up a new one that Friday. Same spot, same post, same dimensions, welded in tight. For 2 days, nothing. Then, early Sunday morning, a woman named Becca Haywood called the sheriff's office. She was taking her dog out and saw what she thought was a body by the road. Turned out to be the new sign, oozing the same dark fluid, the metal literally weeping from the seams. It pooled on the gravel and turned flies slick with red. Her border collie wouldn't go near it, just howled and trembled until she dragged him back into her truck. The county tried again twice. Each time, same result. The third sign started leaking within 12 hours. After that, they stopped replacing it. A week later, the road was rerouted. They said it was due to erosion concerns, but everybody knew that was a lie. A bad one. That might have been the end of it, just another West Texas ghost story, if not for the survey crew. They were 4 of them, all out-of-county contractors, hired to plot new easements after the reroute. Miguel Vasquez, Denise Norton, Wayne Clay, and a kid fresh out of tech school named Trevor Gant. They left the city offices in Mineral Wells on July 9th, signed out a Jeep Cherokee and some topo maps. They were expected to check in by 6 p.m. Never did. The vehicle was found 3 days later in a low gully just north of the old sign's location. The windows were fogged from the inside, like someone had been breathing heavy in it for hours, and the seats were soaked in condensation. But no bodies. No tracks. Just 4 pairs of boots lined up neatly on the shoulder, side by side, toes pointed toward the brush. Inside the Jeep, they found the equipment still powered on. The GPS unit had locked onto a final coordinate about 30 yards off the road. Deputies followed it. What they found was nothing. No disturbed earth. No blood. No drag marks. Just a patch of dead mesquite trees, bark peeling like old skin. And the smell of copper on the wind dot. After that, the county sealed the section entirely. You can still see the barricades if you drive past in the early morning. Old wooden horses with faded reflective strips sitting like tired sentinels. Local kids toss beer bottles at them sometimes. Most of them don't even remember what the Pathé sign said. They just call it the Bleeding Road now, but people around here, the ones who've lived through a few Texas summers and know how the land likes to keep its secrets buried deep, they remember more than they'll say. There was this one old rancher, Clyde Purcell, who lived 2 miles north of the site. Died in 2001. Before he passed, he used to sit outside the feed store and drink from a chipped thermos full of wild turkey, muttering to anyone who'd listen that the sign was a marker, not for roads but for graves. Claimed the land under that road used to be a Comanche burial site back before the railroad sliced through the prairie. Said the survey team didn't vanish, they were taken back. That's how he'd put it. Taken back. There's more too if you dig through the county archives. Back in 1912, a railway crew abandoned a section of track just west of the same location. Official reason: soft ground, unstable base. But in a letter from the foreman to his wife filed in a private collection at the courthouse, he described a red seepage coming up from the ballast, soaking their boots, staining their hands. He said one man went mad, walked off into the chaparral singing in German, even though he was born in Kansas. That crew never finished the stretch. The line detoured north. Even farther back in 1876, there was a settler family, the Kitteridges, who went missing, 8 people. Their farmhouse was found abandoned, supper still warm on the table. No sign of struggle, no signs of departure. The only clue? A crude wooden sign carved with the letters CR 4870 found leaning against the which had gone completely dry overnight. I don't think it's the sign that bleeds. I think it's the ground. There's something underneath it. Something the Comanche might have known about. Something the railroad tried to avoid. Something that breathes slow and steady like a buried animal. It doesn't want to be mapped. It doesn't want to be pinned down. It's not rage that makes it bleed. It's hunger. I drove past it once. Only once. It was 1997, just after my uncle died, and I was headed west to Cisco for a funeral. I missed the detour sign, wasn't paying attention. Came up on the old section before I even realized it. The road was cracked, buckled, and sun-bleached, but I could still see where the sign used to be. Just two rusted bolts jutting out of a concrete base like broken teeth. I pulled over, don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something else. The air was wrong, heavy, like it hadn't moved in 100 years. My ears popped. No sound, no birds, not even wind through the brush. I stepped out and walked toward the bolt. There was something written on the base in fading red, barely legible. Looked like down. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, wet, like someone walking barefoot through mud. But the ground was dry. My shadow moved wrong, two-lagged half a second behind me, like it was waking up late. I didn't stick around. I drove on faster than I should have. For a full mile, my rearview mirror didn't show the road behind me. Just a blank gray void, like the highway had vanished. Some places don't want to be known. Some things don't want to be named. They should have left that land alone. They should never have. Tried to mark it. Out past Terlingua, down a two-lane strip of scorched asphalt that winds like a lazy rattlesnake toward the sunburnt bones of Big Bend. There's a stretch of road the locals don't like to talk about, not because they're superstitious or God-fearing, or even that concerned with tourist safety. It's more like shame, the kind of fear that's woven into your blood after you've seen something that breaks the world just enough to make it stop feeling real. Most of the time, you can drive it just fine, windows down, dust in your teeth, radio crackling out old country or Tejano ballads. But sometimes, late in the day when the sun is slouching behind the Chisos and the air gets that pink-orange haze, like you're looking through a bruise, you might see him. The first time I heard about him was from a man named Junior Vance, who ran a busted gas station near Study Butte, the kind of place that sells moon pies, off-brand motor oil, and bad directions. I was out there working on a photojournalism piece about abandoned places along the Rio Grande border towns emptied out like dead snakeskins. Decaying trailers with Spanish prayers still scrawled on the walls, ghost motels where the desert had started pushing the walls in. I had a camera bag, a rental truck, and no real sense of how long I'd be out there. Just the vague need to get lost somewhere strange. Junior had sun-scabbed skin and a glass eye that never looked quite where you were. He told me the story like he didn't want to, like it came out without permission. You ever seen somebody walk backward? He asked, tapping the counter with a yellow fingernail. I don't mean like a drunk stumbling or a kid playing around. I mean full speed, downhill, upright, like he's being pulled by something behind him and he don't want to see it. I told him no. He nodded like he knew I'd say that. Well, he don't stop. You'll see his dust first, hanging in the air like a breath held too long. Then the figure. White suit, all sharp and too clean for a place like this. Walks backward right down the center line of the road. Never turns, never trips, never even slows. I asked what happened if you talked to him. Junior just scratched his ear and looked toward the front window like he expected to see something in the heat shimmer. Don't. That's what happens. You don't. I thought it was a story to sell me gas and a lukewarm Dr. Pepper, but something in his face said otherwise. Something hollow, like a bone someone had sucked the marrow from. The next few days I kept to my plan. Took photos of rusted-out RVs, abandoned diners with half the letters gone, _eat_ear, and a collapsed gas station that had a single armchair sitting out front, facing the highway like someone had been waiting a long time and gave up. But the story itched at me. I started asking around. Nobody said much, but they gave each other the same sidelong look when I brought it up. It wasn't a myth. Not exactly. More like a bad memory shared by people who didn't want to own it. It was an older woman in Presidio who finally broke. I'd asked her if she knew anything about the man who walked backward, and her hands froze on the register like she'd forgotten how to type. "We saw him once," she said. Her name was Elena. Me and my husband. October, maybe 2012. Drove out past Panther Junction for a night hike, but it got too dark. We were on the road back when I saw him in the rear view. Just a speck at first, but he was moving so fast it didn't make sense. I thought it was a trick. Dust devils, shadows, you know? Her eyes went glassy. She wasn't seeing me anymore. My husband slowed down. Curiosity or something worse. I turned around in my seat to look at him, not the mirror, really looked. Ears started ringing like someone struck a tuning fork in my skull. And he turned. I asked what she saw. "No face," she said quietly. "Just teeth, all the way across, not smiling. Just too many." They didn't stop. They kept driving, didn't even speak till they hit Terlingua and sat in silence. At the porch of the Starlight Theater. Her husband, she said, never looked quite the same after that. He sleeps with the lights on now, doesn't talk when it gets dark, just hums. I started driving the road at dusk. Not every night, just when the light was right and the air had that heavy hush like a held breath. Sometimes I parked and waited with the engine off, watching the heat dance on the pavement. I didn't see anything for weeks. Then one evening, late July, the temperature had dropped just a little, and I saw a shimmer that didn't quite match the rest. Like a vertical heat distortion, tall and narrow. Dust behind it, kicked up in reverse. My chest got tight. I hadn't even lifted the camera yet. He stepped into view like a film reel stuttering in reverse smooth but wrong. A white suit, clean. As bone, not a speck of dirt on it. He didn't look at me. Just walked backward, arms at his sides, head tilted slightly like he was listening to something far away. I wanted to look closer. Some terrible part of me craved it. But my ears were already ringing, not loud. Just a whine like a bad frequency, vibrating in the soft meat of my skull. My hands went cold. I reached for the camera and froze. The lens felt wrong in my fingers, like it had been sitting in an oven. The man passed me. Didn't glance. Didn't waver. Just kept walking, backward, down the yellow line, swallowed slowly by the horizon. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat. In the motel room, replaying it. Thinking of the suit, the speed, the silence. Trying to convince myself it was a heat mirage, some glitch of the eyes. But I knew it wasn't. And worse, I wanted to see him again. I went back the next night. And the next. The fourth night, I brought a field recorder. Left it running as I stood by the truck. Nothing. But when I played it back later, there was a voice under the wind. Not words, not language, just breathing. Wet, ragged, and getting closer with each second. I threw the recorder in the motel dumpster and tried to pretend IDN single quotes T. One night I met a couple from Austin, Jesse and Lena. Campers, DIY van lifers. They saw me parked and stopped to chat, assuming I was another traveler. We shared beers and stories until dusk started bleeding in, and I asked if they'd heard the story. They hadn't. They laughed. Thought it sounded like performance art, but when I told it, something shifted in their faces. Jesse's smile faltered. They left around midnight. The next morning, I found their van abandoned 5 miles up the road. Doors wide open, headlights still on, no blood, No tracks. Just dust, a low whine in the air, and a long set of backward. Footprints disappearing into the desert. I called the sheriff, who didn't even pretend to be surprised. Just took my statement, nodded grimly, and told me I should head home. IDN single quotes T. something about that stretch of road pulled at me. I kept watching, kept waiting. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses. Not the man himself, but shadows moving the wrong direction. Audio static on the radio. My mirrors turning just slightly when I wasn't looking. A few weeks ago, I saw him again, closer this time. He stopped, didn't turn, just stopped walking. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I swear, the sky around him rippled. My ears were screaming like a fire alarm had gone off inside my skull. Then so slowly it made my guts knot, he tilted his head, and he turned. I can't describe what I saw, not really. There was no face, just teeth, not in a smile. Just row after row, too. Many going deeper than a human skull should allow. Black gums. A wet, clicking sound like he was grinding them in anticipation. I drove away. Tires screaming, tears down my cheeks. But I don't think I left him behind. Every mirror shows me something now. Just for a second. A man in white walking the wrong direction. I haven't slept in days. My ears won't stop ringing. And sometimes, in the silence, I hear footsteps. Getting closer, but never from the front. They say the land out near Vega, Texas, just off the old veins of Route 66, doesn't forget what's buried in it. Drought-blasted fields, wind-hollowed silos, and stretches of cracked asphalt that hum under your tires like they're whispering. Secrets. Locals mostly keep to themselves. Farmers, ex-oil men too proud to leave and too tired to care. Folks there drink their coffee black, keep their guns oiled, and their prayers quiet. But even in a place like that, people talk. And if you spend enough time in Earl's Feed and Supply or the corner stool at Ruby's Diner, someone will bring up the watch. It always starts the same. You hear about what they found off 66 last month? Doesn't matter when you ask someone's. Always just found it. Dug up in a field, caught in a barbed wire fence, wedged under the bleached bones of a dead steer. It's a cheap-looking thing. Digital display, cracked face, black plastic band melted at the edge like it's been through. Hell, no buttons. No brand. Just numbers, always ticking down. First time I heard about it was from a man named Charlie Baker. He came into Ruby's wearing an oil-stained cap and a look in his eyes like he hadn't slept in a week. Charlie was a rough sort, raised on a cattle ranch, worked the derricks, married young, divorced younger. Not the kind to scare easy. But that night he was chain-smoking like the world was ending. I was sitting 3 stools down. He asked Ruby for whiskey, and Ruby reminded him she didn't serve anything stronger than coffee and sweet tea. Charlie just muttered something about how coffee wouldn't do a damn thing for him now. He found the watch while clearing brush off his property. Said it was half buried under the roots of a dead mesquite, ticking like a bomb. Countdown at 72 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds, 3 days, exactly. He thought it was some kid's prank. Took it home, tried prying it open. Nothing. No screws, no seams. Just that screen and the numbers ticking down. He told his brother about it, who joked it looked like something out of a movie, probably counting down to some kind of birthday alarm. Charlie didn't laugh. He said the longer he had it, the heavier it felt. Like it was watching him. He smashed it with a ball-peen hammer in the garage. Flattened it right into the workbench. Bent the nails. Clean through the wood. That was the first night he started hearing things, whispers coming from the trees outside, soft scratching at the bedroom window. His wife left the next morning. Said she caught him standing in the hallway at 2 a.m., staring at their sons. Room like he was listening to something no one else could hear. He didn't remember doing that. 3 days to the hour after he found it, Charlie's house burned to the ground. Investigators said it was faulty wiring in the garage, but Charlie swore the fire came from inside the walls. He crawled out through the kitchen window, his arms covered in burns. They found the watch the next morning in the ashes, still ticking. Countdown back at 72 hours. By the time I met him, he was living in a trailer out past the train tracks, sleeping with the lights on and a shotgun by his bed. He wouldn't go near it again, but it didn't seem to matter. Said he could still hear the ticking if he closed his eyes. Even claimed it came back to him once, showed up in his mailbox, clean as a whistle, countdown starting fresh. He drove it 50 miles out and dropped it in the Brazos River. 2 weeks later, a kid found it while skipping stones and brought it back to town. That's when things really got strange. The kid's name was Julian, barely 16. Good kid, church-going, played football. He found the watch while fishing with his uncle near the river bend. Said he felt this tug in his stomach the moment he picked it up, like his gut knew something his brain didn't. The countdown was at 48 hours by then. His uncle told him to throw it back. Julian didn't. He took it home. Next day, his dog went missing. Then his phone stopped working. Lights flickered in his room like there was a storm coming, only there wasn't a cloud in the sky. On the second night, Julian's mom found him sitting in the dark, bleeding from both ears. He said he heard voices, hundreds of them, all whispering the same word. Soon, he went catatonic after that. They took him to a facility in Amarillo. He hasn't spoken since. But the strangest thing? That facility burned down last spring. Everyone made it out except Julian. And guess what the firemen found in the remains, tucked neatly under his mattress? Same watch. Countdown at 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 1 second. Still ticking. After that, no one wanted to touch it. Cops tried bagging it as evidence, but the bag melted. Some old preacher tried to bury it under the church's foundation. 3 days later, the steeple collapsed during morning service. No one was hurt, but half the congregation swore they heard screaming from the ground before the roof gave in. People tried everything: cement, fire, acid, even a damn wood chipper. Didn't matter. It always came back. Never to the same place twice, but always to someone nearby, like it was looking for something or someone. About a month ago, I was heading east on 66, just past the dried-up gas station with the rusted Sinclair sign, when I saw something glint in the ditch. Curiosity's a hell of a thing. I pulled over, got out. There it was, half covered in red dust, cracked face. Burned band, ticking. I didn't pick it up, not right away. I just stared at it, heart pounding like I'd been running. I could feel it in my chest, in my teeth even. A low vibration, like the earth was humming some ancient song. But then I saw the numbers. 71 hours, 59 minutes, and 47 seconds. I hadn't even touched it, and it was already counting down. I looked around, expecting to see someone watching, but the road was empty. Nothing but wind and weeds and that low electric hum. I backed away, got in my truck, and drove like hell. But that night, I heard it. In my kitchen drawer, soft beeping, ticking. I opened it and found the watch lying between my forks and a pocket knife. Countdown at 63 hours, 14 minutes, and 9 seconds. I live alone. No one has a key. I didn't bring it with me. I swear to God I didn't. I tried to ignore it. Thought maybe if I left it alone, it would go away. It didn't. Lights flicker now. My cat's gone missing. I hear things in the static when I leave the TV on, like muffled crying or something trying to speak underwater. Yesterday I found my bedroom mirror cracked down the center. Just one long, clean split. Like something had been looking through it too hard. I drove it out past the old quarry. dropped it down a shaft no one's climbed in 20 years. I watched it fall, spinning end over end into the dark, last night. It was under my pillow. The countdown says 0 hours 12 minutes and 21 seconds now. I don't know what happens when it hits 0. Maybe nothing. Maybe the whole world ends, but I can't give it to anyone else. I won't. Whatever it's counting down to, it's mine now. My reckoning dot, so if you're reading this, if you ever find a watch out there in the dust, ticking away like it's keeping time for something older than time, don't touch it, because it's not a countdown dot, it's a promise.